What's up, Thunk Tank listeners?
What?
It's me and Joe here. We're in my car. We just had a few beers.
You probably shouldn't say that string of words in a sentence.
The car beer thing?
Yeah. Just start it over.
Really?
No, I don't care.
I think we're fine.
Yeah, we're
I had
good.
2 beers. We're going to be fine.
I feel great.
So thanks for downloading the podcast. This is our episode on politics.
Politicaling.
I don't know. We were kind of avoiding doing this one for a while. It's a whole fucking thing.
Yeah, we just needed to get it out there.
We need to get it out there.
We've touched upon a lot of the topics that you'll hear in different episodes and different iterations. And so we really just figured, let's just really cover this stuff a little bit more in depth once and for all. And, of course, it raises other issues, as you'll see. But I think we do a pretty good spread, right?
Yeah. So I let me just start. I wrote a blog post out to sort of accompany this episode.
Luca Festo.
A Luca Festo. Just because, like, as I was thinking about, like, hey, we should do an episode on politics, I also thought, like, man, this gets so fucking complicated so fast. So
It's pretty good. I didn't read it.
yeah, I mean, so there's one review right there. We sort of actually switched our website up, so it's over at a WordPress thing. You know, you'll get the link from wherever what the fuck
Oh, shit.
we're going to do with this.
Do we know the name of the...
It's thunktankpodcast.wordpress.com.
I knew that.
We just wanted to have like a better looking website where we could
It's sleeker.
post the episodes and also
that
like
word.
maybe make some blog posts that accompany them or whatever.
Like, share, and subscribe.
So that's what's going on with this. If you want to get into, let's say, the details of sort of the views I tried to express on these political issues, I would go there first.
We'll have it all sorted out, for sure.
I guess, you know, the podcast was sort of the conversation wandering version of it.
Well,
whereas
there's just so many, like, topics to touch upon again. You know, the vibe sort of shifts between...
and it's hard to sort of go into enough detail on any one of them.
Right, yeah. There are topics we cover that probably deserve their own episodes themselves, and we probably will do that at some point, but I think we did a pretty good job
We also
getting at
reference
the essence of...
Yeah.
You know, political polarization is really sort of what it was about, right?
I know going in we wanted to mostly focus on just calling out dogmatic and like extremist
Yeah.
thinking from any angle.
Yeah, any end of the political...
And there's no shortage of that coming from the right of politics. But for full transparency, like most of what I write about and what we talked about was calling out some of the dogmatic thinking that is coming from the left currently. And, you know, that can be a tricky thing to call out these days. You know, it's very common for anybody criticizing the left to sort of be kicked out of the left. I consider myself part of the left.
Especially because so you're saying...
For the so you're saying type reasons.
So you're saying...
you know...
Do you hear my voice shaking, Luke?
Like, very deeply progressive people get called racist, bigot, sexist, Nazi, fascist. Like, all these words just get thrown around and they end up meaning nothing at the end of the day. So I think we kind of wanted to just, like, throw in our 2 cents, and...
I threw in 3 cents.
I threw in like 10 with the amount I wrote. I was on a plane to Colorado, and it was like a 5-hour flight, and I just like started writing and just like kept writing, and it's a bit of a long blog post, but
That's what happens
it helped
when
me sort of
you're
like think through the
inspired, man.
issues. So like a lot of events that we reference in the episode, you kind of want to know the backstory to it. Things like the Evergreen College controversy, Middlebury College, the James DeBoer memo from Google.
Those are all names.
So if you don't know any of these type controversies that involve like so-called SJW things, and I mean, look into it. There's plenty of links attached to this episode.
Yeah,
And if you go
there's
into
gonna
the
be some
blog
links.
post, you'll get sort of the details of where we're coming from. We're not bad people. I hope that even if you disagree with us, that the primary purpose of this episode is to sort of promote healthy conversation, promote the idea that you can disagree with people without making them into like evil people.
You do realize that's exactly what a bad person would say, Luke.
So you're saying...
See, I got him. I nailed him.
So Joe regularly in this episode
Points out the truth.
morphs into the character of SJW Joe.
I don't know.
That's hard to say.
I'm not
SJW, Joe.
I'm not familiar with that term.
And just sort of like corners me into the classic. So you're saying, makes me a troglodyte instead of
Now
trying
you're
to be
just
an
using
independent
fancy
thinker.
words that sound like a European chocolate. That's ridiculous.
So, look into the backstories of these things if you don't know about them already. If you do know about them, you'll be able to follow the thread of the conversation pretty well. But am I missing anything?
Please check us out on Patreon.
Okay, so if you want to support the podcast, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/ThunkTankPodcast.
It's also in the links.
For as little as $1 an episode, which...
You get high fives all around.
At most $4 a month. We'll never do more than 4 episodes a month.
We definitely won't.
Usually, as of lately, we've been pretty busy. Sorry if we haven't been getting episodes out totally on time, but
we put so much work and quality into each episode. It's hard to do one a week.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what's going on.
It's a lot of drinking.
It's a lot of drinking, yeah.
And thinking.
And thinking and thunking.
But hey, that's how it goes.
So please consider supporting us on there. We're close, I think, any day now, because I have an Amazon gift card. I'll be able to get a microphone that I can use, and now Joe won't have to use his clip-on microphone.
Yeah, there may or may not be clothespins involved in the making
There's
of this
clothespins,
operation.
and there's all sorts of shenanigans going on right now.
Socks.
I mean, we have a mixer, which has been helpful, but it's also on the fritz. It's like an old mixer that goes in and out. So for the first 20 minutes, my audio in particular was a little bit weird, and then for some reason it started working. So eventually we'd love to save enough money aside to get like a new mixer that fully works. That's where like support will go. Also, it'll potentially in the future go into like better research and just kind of more time finding cooler guests.
Yeah, I mean, the amount of beer we'll be able to buy for $100 an episode.
Yeah,
Think about it.
We'll get more beer than we...
There is a $100 tier. I don't know what the rewards are, though.
I think the reward description says you're insane if you choose this tier.
Yeah, it's like, don't pick this
Don't
tier.
pick this, you
Don't do
idiot.
it.
Yeah.
You hit your head. You need medical attention immediately.
So this is a bit of a serious episode for us. Like,
oh yeah, it is a bit terse.
I think about if you really enjoy
it's
us
fine,
more
it's
for the humor and the silliness. About halfway through, I got back from a bathroom break, or Joe did, whatever.
Oh, is that when you're talking about gonorrhea?
So, well, the booze really hit us, and we finally like settled into a schwing.
Yeah,
I think especially the first 20 minutes, we were just like tiptoeing around this politic episode. We had no idea like how to start it.
I wasn't drunk enough to say things that are on the political record.
Exactly.
You know? So
I may or may not have announced my official candidacy for Congress.
Oh yeah, we did nominate you.
And then, like Joe mentioned just before, something about a gonorrhea drunk tank came up. I don't know exactly.
I gotta go back and listen.
Yeah, we gotta listen to the details.
But, yeah, it's all in there.
Yeah.
It's
so,
all there.
Hopefully you stick through this more of a serious episode. If you kind of want to get the full context, check out the episode links. And if you want the full kind of details of what we think, please check out the blog post. We'll be posting more and more content on the blog. And hopefully it's just a different way to engage with an audience. Ultimately, good conversation means, how do you disagree with people? How do you understand people? How do you have good faith conversations instead of bad faith conversations? This is, I think, the sort of central idea I wanted to hit on, and I think it's what podcasts are great at: long form conversation where you can understand people and disagree properly instead of straw manning and all that bullshit.
Yeah.
Did we get it?
Like, share, and subscribe.
All right. Thanks for listening. Number one way you can help us, I know not everybody can donate. Just share it with at least one person you think might like it.
Oh, yeah. Sharing is huge.
Sharing is huge. It reaches
as a matter of fact.
Critical mass achieved, and then,
Yeah.
who knows what can happen.
And then the monkeys are eating coconuts.
Exactly.
That's a sentence.
Ooh, ah, ah. All right. Enjoy the episode on politics.
And
what's the title of it?
We said something about politickling.
Politickling our thunkrection. That's not going to be the title, but like I'm going to go home and figure out a title. All right,
we'll mull on it.
We'll mull on it
a little bit longer. Yeah.
All right, Joe, get out of my car.
Okay, see ya.
Peace.
Night.
Wait, how do you hit stop?
Attention, humans. This is a Thunk Tank. Please insert this podcast directly into your nearest orifice for viewing pleasure.
Okay, you ready? Oh, shit.
Welcome to the Thunk Tank. Welcome to the Thunk Tank. Oh yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Come into our Thunk Tank.
Luke, don't switch to the other peanuts.
Welcome to the Thunk Tank. Come in the tank. We're thinking, and we're drinking,
And we're thunked.
and we're thunked.
Oh my god, I'm probably more beer than man if we go far enough back at this point.
And then you're good to go.
All right, we're live, guys.
It's official?
It's official. Yeah,
What have we not been doing this whole time?
I didn't hit record until just now.
Oh, they missed,
Welcome,
they missed everything. Yeah.
Welcome, people, to the Thunk Tank podcast,
Dear God.
you are
This is
rusty.
going to be a long episode, man.
late night edition of the Thunk Tank
It is late night.
podcast.
Wait, welcome the animals, too, not just the people.
Welcome anybody. If you're a dog, if you're a cat, if you're a snake,
Alien?
even.
What about
welcome.
the aliens listening?
I don't know about snakes. They freak me out.
Yeah, no snakes.
Wow, you're drawing a line. He's already drawn
So speaking of
lines.
drawing lines,
Already.
Thunk Tank podcast is officially gonna do a political episode.
And go out of business.
And by officially, I mean like we're just gonna actually talk about our opinions in politics and not just kind of like throw them out there secretly on the topic of something else.
Well, we've touched upon it. We've dabbled in various
Hold on.
capacities.
You can't say, hey, we're going to do a politic episode and then try to qualify it. Because I sense
What do you
that's
mean?
the next thing coming.
No,
Being
we're not
like, hey,
qualifying
don't
it.
get offended if we say something you don't
Oh,
like.
I
but-
did want to qualify it a little bit, and maybe we'll even do that in an intro that you just heard. But
Yeah. Well, we should say, like, we're not political scientists. We don't.
obviously not that yet.
But I don't know if people think that or know or don't know that, right?
So
They could tell.
I mean, it should be rather obvious, you know?
well, Joe, let's just start at the fact of like why were we hesitant to do an episode on politics? Would you say?
I mean, I would say on a very just sort of macro level, probably a lot of what we're going to talk about, which is kind of this this culture of, it's almost like gotchaism, right? Where
Yeah.
it's so easy now with this sounds like such an old person thing to say, but it's so true, right? Like it's so easy to take a clip or a quote or whatever out of context or within whatever context that it was happening at the time, and then characterize or mischaracterize something as what it really isn't. And
You can recontextualize anything
sure,
anyone
yeah.
said now.
And it's one of these things that like we see. I think we're going to get into it pretty deep, that it happens across all spectrums, right? And it's not productive to actually getting at the real issues and the real problems and, you know, ideally the real solutions.
Right. So for some reason,
And that's why we're wary of it, or aware of it at least, right?
well, so I think generally it's really popular to criticize the right in America right now, and even though a lot of the tactics that I think I'll probably be criticizing about, like let's say mostly the left, in this episode, it's equally used by the right, you know. But there seems to be a strange. Let me just start off. I wrote like a bit of like a blog post kind of thing that I'll find a way to
A treatise of sorts, right?
put it somewhere where we post this episode. I don't know exactly where, but we'll get the links out when this episode is published.
Yeah.
Because I was just so confused by politics and by trying to have opinions of politics and stuff that I felt like I just had to start writing it down. And I was on a plane on my way to not Chicago. Colorado. I knew it was a C.
You had it at sea, yeah.
And I just started like stream of consciousness, like writing.
But that's useful to sort out your own
It
thoughts.
really was, and
Not
it felt
enough
like I
people
was
do
letting
that.
a load off my brain.
Yeah.
And then later, I went back and sort of like cut and paste things and organize it roughly
Yeah.
into different sections. So
But that's how thought should be anyways.
Well, I mean, one, I realized, wow, it's been a while because I've been out of grad school for 2 years. Over 2 years now.
Wait, really?
Oh, God.
What have you been doing?
Making money, brother. No,
Podcasting.
Definitely not.
Thunk tanking.
selling
So, yeah.
soundboards.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So yeah, started working on my struggling startup soundboard
yeah.
business.
We've got one, but it's a little
Make
bit
a
problematic.
progress.
That's an ongoing
Make a
joke.
progress.
Like, share, and subscribe.
So like I realized how good writing is to sort of not only organize your thoughts and whatever, like, but it's also like you don't even really know your thoughts until you write them down.
Well, and it becomes, like you said, where you started reorganizing them. The same thing that we've talked about in previous episodes about, I think this actually comes up in the Vonnegut episode, this idea of self-editing or editing one's own identity of what reality is or existence is.
Editing,
or their place in existence or how others work into that. The ability to edit that that's everything, right? If you can't do that, where are you going to go from there?
Right.
It's going to be a really hard battle for yourself if you can't edit your own programming.
Right. So the themes that I sort of when I organized it, I put it in order of like what I feel super confident in first, and I wrote longer things about that, and
Yeah,
then
that
at
makes
the
sense.
end were like the topics in politics where I'm just very suspicious, and I had more questions that I don't see being answered. You know?
Yeah.
So
but
like,
that's the way you should organize it, right?
I think so. And I
Yeah.
even said, like, I wrote a
Yeah.
little intro. I was like, I'm pretty much like, there are a few things where I feel
Yeah.
close to 100% confident in like the principled thinking of it. And then things where I really don't know if I even fully understand
Yeah.
whatever's going on.
Which
but
is a hard thing for a lot of
So
people
this-
to admit, which I think is the problem of what we're going to talk a lot
Yeah.
about, right? Yeah.
Yeah, this whole conversation is why I don't want to do a politics episode, which is it's so scary that we're all I could tell by the way we're talking, we're all terrified we're going to say the wrong thing and it's going to
Right.
ruin everything.
I mean, we're
not just
6
ruin the
minutes in,
podcast,
and we're
which-
qualifying the whole
Well,
episode.
still qualify.
Johnny, you're
Yeah.
right. It
And-
ruins careers.
and you could say the wrong thing at minute 37, but spend 20 minutes putting it into a context that
Yeah.
makes sense. But that's not what happens, and then it could spill over and ruin your regular life. Like not just our podcast that no one listens
Yeah.
to, but it
Right.
could also ruin like someone could get angry and like call your job and tell them that you raped them or something. You know what I mean? Someone just gets offended and just overreacts or decides to take you on or take you. Like people can ruin lives very easily.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's why I don't want to do one because I'm definitely scared too because that's a normal reaction. Like humans are a tribe
So
of monkey people, as we've talked about, and we react to tribal pressures like this. When everyone's upset, freaked out about something, you learn to be aware of it.
Can you say that with a few more oohs and ahs?
I don't want to appropriate monkey culture, so I don't think it's right for me to
anybody
make
that
oohs and ahs, Joe.
I think,
Check your humanoid, your Homo sapien privilege.
I'm not saying anything as per your point.
Yeah, see? I just tried to make a dumb joke about not being a monkey, and we probably lost some people there.
You've lost half our
and-
subscriber base.
And I just got a little scared, too. So let's try to do this for a couple of hours and see how it goes.
Well, yeah.
So one of the funny things I noticed. Let's zoom out just a little bit. There's going to be some people who know exactly what we're talking about already. Like if they've been following, I don't know, politics in general. I wonder if my mic cut out. Following politics in general, and/or they're aware of terms like SJW.
Yeah, there are some terms that are probably worth defining like that because I definitely know people. I think I was talking to somebody recently and I mentioned SJW and they legitimately were like, I don't know what that means.
Sure. So how do we sum up this shit? I would say, I mean, definitely check out wherever I post this blog thing because it's
Well, we'll
really-
have some links too,
it's-
for
it's-
sure. Yeah, that will help.
I guess the reason that I found like the blog form of this, like writing it out to be useful is what Johnny was just saying. I'm sort of like setting up a structure of thinking where it's like, you can't go, aha, you got me.
But is it too early to bring up the Google Manifesto?
Mine?
No, the
Oh.
programmer
Damore.
guy.
Actually,
Yeah,
no, it's not. I think the James Damore memo
but that's a perfect example of
is
that.
literally a textbook example of what can happen.
Yeah, I mean, regardless of what you think of it, like that is what happened. Like, there's a couple quotes where if you take them and you just look at them, you can take those and then say, take it from there. Say whatever you want about the guy, right?
Right. So I guess basically the theme of this episode is going to be like, I I think extremism or ideological thinking of any kind is just bad.
We were supposed to have that clip.
Of what? Oh, we
Only the Sith deal in absolutes.
Oh yeah, I was gonna find the YouTube clip of like.
Yeah, that's Disney property. You don't want to fuck with them.
Yeah, of
Politics
all,
aside.
Oh wait, they do own it
of all
now.
the
You're
Disney
right.
to
Yeah.
appropriate, right?
Yeah.
No.
Oh,
don't
you're
fuck
going down,
with Disney.
bitches. Oh.
Yeah, we all know how that goes.
Yeah, corporate Mickey is not to be trifled with.
Right.
I mean, M-Man.
Yeah.
So,
Go
it's like, I guess my main gripe with the left is Joe's smiling at me like, go ahead, make your next move, punk.
I should
Well,
say.
no, hold on. Yeah, we're not setting this up. We're just diving right in. I would say the problem with discourse. You're talking about the state of political discourse and how people that land on different spots on the spectrum are getting so much further apart practically, and they can't talk about anything.
Yeah,
anymore.
like the people themselves, not even the
So
politicians. Yeah.
I would. A lot of people can say it's a lot of different things causing it, but.
Well, it probably is.
I'm inclined, of course, but I'm inclined to think it's mostly just the fracturing of, like opinion and context, like we were talking about. Like, if people are starting with different sets of facts, it's like trying to argue with a flat earther. They're trying to, they're convinced already that the world's flat.
Right.
So you can't present any evidence,
Well, you can't present any evidence that will change their mind, right?
and neither can they. There's no way a flat earther could convince me. I have to be honest. I'm pretty sure.
Well, no,
unless
that was an
well, there
interesting
is. If
point
I
you
went up in a rocket and it was flat, I would believe it. But.
Well, that was an interesting point you brought up, like in an earlier episode. It might have even been like a beta episode where you said, a great way to start a conversation is to ask the other person, what evidence would I have to present to you in order to get you to change your mind? And to your point, if a flat earther wanted to prove to me that the world was flat, there's an amount of evidence they could provide. I just legitimately don't think it exists.
Right.
Obviously, but in a you can ask in a hypothetical scenario, what would you have to do? If the answer's still no, then you're totally lost.
If you sailed me to Antarctica and then we launched off a rocket past
Right.
it and it was just like a waterfall like in the Thor movies
Right.
going into
Exactly.
space, I'd be like, well, shit, I might have been wrong.
Right.
But I'm pretty sure if we did, we would just crash in Antarctica and die. So
Right. I'm fairly confident, as a matter of fact.
I'm 100%
Yeah.
confident. They're 100% confident of the opposite, but
Right, but
Well, I would argue that even something like flat Earth, that you might not be 100% confident.
that the Earth is flat, or
Actually,
that
I
it
first
isn't.
heard this from you, Johnny. I don't know if you heard it from somewhere else, but I put as the first main section of what I wrote out, I named it like editability or something like that. And the idea is whenever two humans are connecting and talking, right?
Mm-hmm.
Trying to work some shit out, let's say. It's like, well, our two choices really are let's have a conversation and figure shit out, or let's get violent and see who wins. And so
And that's probably
editability,
preset going in, oftentimes, right? It's
well,
like people go in
but
like
fair
not
enough.
wanting
Like,
to
what,
change.
what are the alternatives besides that?
well, there's a whole spectrum between them of how long do we talk and at what
Yeah,
point
that's
does
true.
it turn into
That's a good
violence.
point.
So
Yeah.
it's a scale.
So the question
Yeah.
you brought up when we did the episode on conspiracies, Johnny, was if you want to find out if you're in a bullshit conversation with someone,
Oh,
meaning
the
are
bullsh-
you
the
are you
bullshit
in a
detector?
conversation that is a dead conversation? Is it useless? Is
Right.
it going to go anywhere? Ask
an
them
exercise
one
of
question.
futility.
Before you even get into the whole thing, ask them, what evidence could I present that would change your mind? And the key question is you're asking them, like, is there any evidence, real or hypothetical, that could get you to change your mind? If they say no, then what's the point of talking,
Right.
right?
And the answer should
Yeah, you're
always
done.
be yes. Like there is an amount of information or amount of like proof in, again, even as a hypothetical, but
The proof's in the pudding, as they say.
But I think to your point, it's an interesting point of like what angle are people coming from? Like it's not always about ideas, and I think this is the problem with like we're starting to get into with political discourse where it's about winning, right? It's about these extremist ideologies on whatever side of the spectrum you are. You see them on,
Yeah.
of course, you see them on all sides of a spectrum because in any group of people or philosophy or mindset or something like that, there's going to be normal people, and there's pretty much going to be crazy people, and some of them obviously have a lot more. Sometimes it's just people going along who are in it for the wrong reasons. Other times there's people who are very to the point, like crazy about it, like they're going to push it to the end, to the extreme, to the max as much as they can.
Well, they think they just literally think in black and white, and you can't reason with someone who's like, this is. I don't mean that racially, obviously. By the way, I just mean it as an expression.
I mean, you brought it up, but go on.
Joe's going to be slipping in and out of character of like devil's advocating.
No, I'm just going to be pointing things out.
Can you use that word like that?
Devil's advocate.
So, Joe, we were talking yesterday about like, oh yeah, we're doing this episode tomorrow. What angle are we taking? Like whatever, and like we kind of settled on like, yeah, well, obviously there's problems on the right, and you could do a whole 100 episodes on that if you want. I mean, fucking Donald Trump's the president. Like, there's no shortage of bullshit
before we
there.
dive into left and right, just right before, I just want to say one thing that what I meant by like things are fracturing are people used to, at least I think from what history I've studied, when you talk to older people that are still alive, people used to try to figure out what was right and then try to convince someone else that you're right. Whereas now it seems the growing focus is on figuring out what's right and then being right, or making that rightness happen.
Yeah, it's more about being right.
But is that really growing, or is it just we're all so connected with social media that group is louder?
That's a really
good question.
Not
a growing
That's a
minority.
Really good question.
But what if that doesn't matter? What if there's, even though you're a small minority percentage wise, it's still there's enough people of a mass that you can affect change and disrupt things and fuck shit up. So like that's the worrisome thing, that maybe it isn't as big as it seems, but it's still just as bad of a problem.
Well, and that's something that we've talked about too. Like the loudest voices aren't always the most voices; they just seem like that.
And the internet only magnifies this quality of loud voices being too loud.
Yeah, but the problem with that is that can catch on. Like that can seem like, oh, this is what these people are about. For you either being a part of that group or you distancing yourself from that group, right? And that just,
I mean, if the majority of people are convinced that that's what the majority of everyone else thinks, then that is what it becomes a reality.
But that's a problem.
Yeah, that's a problem with us as people. But it's also specifically a problem right now.
But I think
things are getting crazy.
But I think like what you're saying, like social media and like internet connectivity in terms of like social media, that seems to be proliferating that issue.
It almost seems like,
for sure.
If ideologies and sort of political bubbles of thought, let's say, because maybe there's a category before the ideology is officially like this hardened computer virus in your mind.
But also, who defines that? Like you were saying, like SJW.
Well, it doesn't matter about that definition. I'm just talking on the social media front. I think that just you can see an ideology as like a life form in itself, and it almost is able to feed and grow, despite maybe low numbers. It's able to grow because of social media, because of Facebook.
Absolutely. Well, look at coming back to flat Earth. That you'll be able to find people who think that, even though maybe that's 1 out of 1,000 people in any given location of 1,000 people. All of a sudden they're all together online, and it seems like, oh, there might be something to this because there's this group with 100,000 followers, and again, they have their own motivations for being there, but that is the same as like Planet Fitness members, and like we know that's a real thing. Planet Fitness is a real place, so maybe the world's flat too. Like, this is how this stuff snowballs.
Before, when you said, oh, 100%, like, I know the world's not flat or whatever, I think you would say, like, maybe even 99.999, but there is evidence that I could present that would change your mind, I would assume, right?
Yeah, I realize I don't think it exists. I'm 100% sure it doesn't exist, but if you presented it to me,
right.
I want to be like, that's the devil creating an image. Like, I don't believe it, or whatever people use to convince themselves of science, like not believing science. But, I might be insane. You might have drugged me. Who knows?
You might be insane regardless.
Well,
yeah.
I think I wrote that at some point. I was like, hey, I think all humans are insane, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, what's one of the ways we keep that insanity inside our mind at bay is like reality checking it against other humans' realities.
Right, which are varying.
And in that sense, reality
Right.
is a negotiation of
Yeah.
all the crazy shit we have in our head. We meet and talk about that. And the reason we talk about it, as we already said, is that's way better than the alternative, which is just violence and domination.
And chaos to that extent. But that comes back to, as well, this idea that, and I think people lose sight of this the more extreme they get, is that they kind of isolate themselves from that connection, and they forget the fact that it doesn't matter who you are. Being human is fucking hard for everyone.
Right.
And that's true for people within certain groups, but it's even if you take it on an individual by individual basis within certain groups, you're going to find people who have been through shit, like
Right.
real shit on an individual level. And people forget that when they just categorize you as part of this group that they disagree with.
Well, so I think one of the things that I noticed the left does is generally in politics, the left is concerned with things like oppression and fairness and equality, right?
And like group oversight, you would say, right? In terms of like governmental regulation, sure.
Just generally, well, that would fit under the quality of fairness, making sure some people aren't getting too much and other people aren't getting too little, that kind of thing.
So now you're describing like modern left, but
Oh, sure, yeah.
I always like to take the historical approach to things when I can, being the amateur historian that I'm not.
Drinking brandy from his iron throne.
As you want to, the left generally is, because the right might argue that they're against oppression. There's been authoritarian leftists that definitely were oppressive. Look at Stalin, you know.
Well, but that
People-
wasn't that as a way to try and get rid of oppression, but then of
Yeah, I
course-
mean that's what they say. And on the right, you know, a super right authoritarian might say, by giving order and making sure the classes stay where they belong, I'm creating peace.
Well,
You know,
that's like
it's still the same.
Yeah, that's like
you're
Hitler versus Stalin. Like one's like communist,
Right, they're
left and
just
one's
you get the
fascist right.
similar end result though. But
Right.
so the left is more about fairness, like you were saying. Like a like a liberal used to mean like, yeah, no preferential treatment, everyone gets a fair chance. And then like if you do have land, no one can come and just steal it. Like fairness, fair play, that idea.
That's why the South was Democrat during the Civil War, right?
It was. Well, that's a whole different
Well,
thing.
so, like, Democrat,
Anyways,
Republican-
continue.
No, but I'm just saying in terms of like terms changing, right? Like Lincoln was a Republican, right?
Lincoln was the first Republican president.
Okay, I don't know enough about this. Though, like that's just what I've heard in the streets.
Yeah, he was the first Republican president because the Democratic Party, we used to be called the Democratic Republicans, and it was the party Thomas Jefferson founded, which was like small government, like that libertarian, liberal mindset where he thought everyone should own land and
then
we
buy
should have to
Louisiana.
vote. Yeah, and you should vote for every like individual taxes on stuff. The government just shouldn't get income tax. It should be like, hey, we need to build this many ships, so we want to tax you this much, and then you have to vote on it. Like he had a very different idea, the Jeffersonian idea, and then it just got bastardized into this like pro-slavery lobby.
Oh, you mean humans ruined it?
States' right. I mean, states' rights lobby.
Exactly.
Yeah, but isn't that so?
But
so true?
so,
of everything?
Joe, when you were saying it's hard to be a human, before we go too far,
Yeah.
I forget who, some biologist I was listening to, evolutionary biologist. It might have been Weinstein, which, there you go. There's some political
good stuff.
inflammation for you. Where he was saying, you know, humans have evolved for like bad situations. Like most of the time it was bad. You know, you're outside either looking for food or running from predators. So
Like,
yeah,
I
you
didn't-
were
I didn't get
evolved.
eaten by the lion because I pushed my friend in the way. Like,
Right, you evolved to suffer. So happiness were these like little things that kept you going. But now that when humans get too happy, we kind of like need to destroy stuff. Is what I got out of it.
You
Thinking
mean, like,
about it.
when things get too ordered, like we need to create chaos, kind of thing.
Yeah, because that's what we're used to. That's what we're comfortable in, even if we don't like it. It's just
that's how
there's
we
a-
like.
There's a,
That's how we evolve. Is like surviving.
yeah, and we're
chaos.
changed. And you don't evolve for your next environment. You evolve for the environment that you just came from, not the current one. That's, or you know what I mean, the one that's
But
changed.
what if I just want to have a bagel?
Yeah, there's that, but you know,
I found
what
the
about
solution.
what about when people start?
Yeah.
What about when people's choices start affecting your ability to bagels? Then you get up. Then that's something you might get upset over.
Shit, is that going through
And
the
then
house
shit
right
goes
now?
down again.
Yeah. Sorry, what happened, Johnny?
Some static. It's okay right now. Don't touch it. Stop touching stuff.
We have a new soundboard, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, but it's a little bit on the fritz.
Well, so are we. As you can tell by my laugh.
Hopefully that works. Hopefully the first 15 minutes wasn't unbearably loud or soft or any of
we
those
can
things.
take care of it in post. It's fine.
We can figure it out. Yeah.
I'm not too worried about it.
So
honestly.
left right has shifted independently of what's called a Democrat or a Republican. But Joe, you were talking about life's fucking hard, right? And so I've noticed that a lot of what the left does is point to all the suffering in the world and then sort of make a claim of, well, because what I point to is true, therefore my policy must be the way to fix the world.
Well, that's a very, and that's a problem because you want to be very clear with causal connections, right?
And you want to be clear with because there's 330 million people in a country, there's no shortage of awful stories of suffering, right?
Well, anecdotal evidence is always,
and that's where statistics comes
Yeah.
in. So, anyways, one of the people we'll talk about a little bit in this episode is Jordan Peterson. He's, I guess you can say this accurately now, a controversial
I believe
figure.
I believe his actual name is So You're Saying.
So I've been reading his new book. It's
Oh my God, you have a book with
called
you?
12 Rules for Life.
What is that?
It's Luke's. It's
a
Luke's
book, Johnny.
Where's the USB
indoctrination
port?
into the cult of Peterson.
So one of the paragraphs I was just rereading a little bit today.
Is about
I'm just going to
lobsters.
read a second of it. Above all, he alerted his students to topics rarely discussed in university, such as the simple fact that all the ancients, from the Buddha to the biblical authors, knew what every slightly worn-out adult knows. Life is suffering. If you are suffering, or someone close to you is, that's sad. But alas, it's not particularly special. We don't suffer only because politicians are dim-witted, or the system is corrupt, or because you and I, like almost everyone else, can legitimately describe ourselves in some way as a victim of something or someone. It's because we are born human and that we are guaranteed a good dose of suffering. And chances are, if you or someone you love is not suffering now, they will be within 5 years unless you're freakishly lucky.
It's very Vonnegut-y.
It is very Vonnegut-y,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
So this is coming. That's actually in the forward.
He is kind of like a clinical Vonnegut
Yeah.
rather than an artistic
Yeah,
Vonnegut.
and
in some
yeah,
ways.
true. So anybody who doesn't know Jordan Peterson, we will
just go
link
to
at least
YouTube.
a video.
Yeah, there's plenty.
I'm not sure exactly, like when I first started hearing about him, I remember thinking like, hey, I'm down with this. Like, I really like what I'm hearing. And then only later did I realize like the controversy that was like surrounding him.
Yeah.
But just to the point of the suffering thing, I see at a lot of like, let's say the one in the news most recently is like gun rallies, right? Like the March for Our Lives that just happened.
I haven't heard of that.
At like Black Lives Matter things, like these things where you see a lot of angry people, and what they're pointing to is a lot of suffering, and it's like fair enough, right? But then it's like if you go and converse with these people who are angry about something and want to see change, and just start asking valid questions like, what are the statistics of this? What is the evidence you have that X policy or this whatever policy will actually work? You often can't even get that far into the conversation before the conversation just shuts down and it's over.
What you've asked them?
So I have had some personal experience with, let's say, interactions with radicalized or SJW type people on the left.
Yeah.
I've had like instances where, so Johnny was talking right at the very beginning of the episode about like, yeah, we just didn't want to do an episode like this because we just felt like we didn't want to talk about it. And one of the things that I've hated about having these thoughts in my mind and not liking what I see about politics is that one of the main thoughts is, you know what, fuck it, I don't feel like talking about it. I don't feel like dealing with the problems.
Yeah. And that shutting
So
down
like a
is
numbing,
problem.
it's a numbing effect,
Yeah.
which exacerbates the issue, the problem,
Exactly.
and makes it hard to address. Because as people become aware of it, it's just too overwhelming, so that you can't get past that inertia to change anything.
Well, and it drives people to
Exactly.
the fringes, right?
Well, because people don't know that there's reasonable people in the middle trying to reclaim dialogue.
And ironically, that's one of I've heard Jordan Peterson say this time and time again, is that his whole thing is, and he says that he's done this time and time again, is to draw people from going to the alt-right. Like
Right.
bringing
He
them
gets
back
accused
from
of being
there.
alt-right, but it's
Yeah.
like he's actually, like you just said, drawn people away from that. One of Jordan Peterson's main
Points.
let's say, is sort yourself out, right?
Oh yeah, take responsibility.
Take responsibility.
But Luke, now I already know I've watched a fair amount of these YouTube videos too. I already know the response. What you're saying is, well, you're a young white male. You're his like main audience. Of course, you like what he's saying. You know.
So how do I respond to that?
How do you respond to that and saying like, well, that's another reason why you're wrong. You don't even realize that he's alt right and you're supporting Nazism or whatever like the super extreme reaction would be.
Sure. So
Doesn't it suck that that's the thought that pops into my head when we try to have a conversation about this stuff?
what
Is
you
what the
should do
most
is take the
extreme
actual-
response could
take
be.
the actual issues on an issue by issue basis and see what he's really saying, right? As opposed to just like, oh, you're this.
That's the ideal approach. Yeah.
yeah, right.
a couple of things, and Johnny, exactly right, which is one of the things that's been so annoying about trying to think through politics is it ends up hurting my brain so fast. And I think part of it is, and this speaks for all of us, like we're all good people. So our instinct is not to be Johnny goes, eh.
I don't know.
Johnny's not entirely convinced.
What I mean is
I can't remember the last time I've been in a soup kitchen. You know.
well, I
Other
mean,
than to eat soup.
of course that, but like who the
Yeah,
fuck
they do a good
has? I
soup.
mean, one of the things I hate about these protests you see, like maybe I'll play a clip from it. The thing that got me first alerted to the fact that there might be a problem on the left was the controversy about the Halloween costumes at Yale. Do you know much about that, Johnny?
Yeah, I think I do. The husband wife couple
Right.
teacher professor. Yeah.
So
how do you
I'll
break
give
that
a
down?
very quick sum up of it now, maybe, and just play a quick clip, because I guess it's like a lot of the reason that I felt obligated to like sort of just burp out my thoughts on this is a lot of people that I personally know, like you said earlier, Joe, they think of themselves on the left and they sort of retweet articles and this and that,
Yeah.
but they don't know the kinds of noises that are coming from the extreme left. They don't know that there are student protest rallies where they hold flags of the hammer and sickle, you know? They don't know like the extent to what the people in Antifa actually believe, you know? And I think if they did, they wouldn't associate themselves with that at all, you know? But for some reason, because they're already on the left, they just maybe aren't as critical enough to like go find the negative things about it, right? So it's like if you're holding a Nazi flag, that's understandably like really bad, and that should be like an ostracized thing. Like, I'm not saying it should be illegal necessarily, but like, you know, you're going to be hard pressed to convince me of much if you're talking to me while holding a Nazi flag, right? A swastika, whatever thing.
So that's where it gets.
Why is it okay to hold the hammer and sickle flag? Hundreds of millions of people were killed in the name of that philosophy.
But see, this
That's
is
a good
right where you
point.
start losing people, because excuse me, because that's the whole hate speech versus is it free speech or not?
Right.
And
And I
I
have
mean,
a good answer for that.
So dangerous speech isn't free speech. You can't incite a riot or to hurt people or destroy things. You can't yell fire in a movie theater is the classic example. You can't yell fire in a theater if there's no fire and people get trampled and killed. Like, you're not able to do that. So the argument is that that speech of the Nazi flag is inciting violence in the Nazi name, and that's why it should be illegal speech.
Oh, so
And
it's like
it's not a terrible argument, but then the counter argument seems to be, yeah, but freedom of speech is too important to guarantee total safety, which isn't a point you can really make, because now you're saying you don't care about people, you know?
right, and
that makes you
and
a
the
Nazi.
problem is that like a lot of things that the Nazis will say may very well incite violence against people.
Right, they do. If you've seen their track history, their track
No,
record,
that's
they've
what I
incited
mean.
and committed violence against millions of people.
Right.
So of course
it's
the,
like part
the
of the
line
whole
can be
thing.
tricky when it comes to the direct inciting of violence, right?
Well, that's like we were just reading before we started the YouTube guidelines, and they have guidelines on hate speech, and one of the things is it says like, yeah, you can't incite violence against people, but it's like,
But okay, so one of the things that the first thing that pops into my mind with the whole free speech thing, and it's the I suppose it's one of the things I'm more confident on in terms of like you said, Johnny, like, yeah, like, of course I don't think the world is flat, and you would have to really, really convince me to change my mind. So I think this is the category of that for me. I know there are fringe examples of where speech is, and I say directly inciting violence, right? But you have to be careful when you base such important principles such as free speech that they're not hinging on very loose factors. So to say hate speech is not free speech, which is a very common phrase you'll hear coming out of the left, right? So when people come to speak on a campus, let's say,
right.
the protests are often, this person's a Nazi, this person's a fascist. By the way, those accusations get thrown out to nearly anybody that someone on the far left disagrees with, right? And most often they haven't actually heard or read or watched any of the content of that person. They're often just told. I watch a lot of YouTube channels where one is called Flecka's Talks, another one is called Nuance Bro. And Nuance Bro is cool because he goes to both rallies and he just asks people factual questions.
Nice.
And just shows that, like, I'm at the Trump rally and, these people don't seem to know much about what they're saying. Oh, here, I'm at the March for Our Lives rally. These people don't know anything about guns, yet they're really passionately protesting guns, And he just kind of calls out bullshit on both sides.
Doesn't this get back to the point about, like, how we mentioned at the beginning that ideologies, like left or right, whichever ones they are, like, you're going to have well-informed people, you're going to have not well-informed people, and you're going to have people that are there for the right reasons and people that are there for the wrong reasons, people that are there for power and control. And
I would push
authority
back
and all
against that and just say I don't think an ideology is ever a good thing. I think an ideology is an excuse for
It
not
sounds like an
thinking
ideology
about
to me, Luke.
Yeah.
Yeah, my one ideology is you shouldn't have ideologies.
That's still an
how do you
ideology,
define
though.
an
So you're a
ideology?
hypocrite, no matter, just like everyone else.
So I would define an ideology.
Even being open-minded is an ideology.
Well, I mean,
yeah.
fair enough. Like, I don't care about that definition so much. I mean, when I mean by ideology, I mean
You mean a fundamentalist, someone that has a fundamental thing.
That's my point. Like,
yeah.
that's everything.
But I could probably look up a better definition, like political ideology. Maybe like just put that before it. But ideology, to me at least, the way. And by the way, definitions get tricky. This is one of the ways conversations can fail, is people work off different definitions, right? So I could be screaming at you right now about ideologies, but then because we're both normal people that, like, aren't assholes, like, I figured out quickly, like, oh, you're thinking of ideology as this definition, not the one I was thinking of. And now we're already bridging the gap
But
between
that's so
our
important
thoughts.
to be able to define terms, because when I hear ideology, I think, like, okay, Republican, Democrat, Libertarian.
Oh, see, I think like a way of viewing the world that is uneditable.
Oh, you think of it in terms of the extreme.
Yeah, I think of it as like
See, this is
Marxism or...
See, so this is a great point. The fact that just hearing the word connotates different definitions to us. Is Johnny looking up the actual definition?
Yeah, I got it.
All right,
What do we got?
Merriam-Webster's is a systematic body of concepts, especially about human life or culture. That's A. B is a manner or the content of thinking characteristic of an individual group or culture. And then C is the integrated assertions, theories, and aims that constitute a socio-political program. So I think the last one is what Luke's talking about.
But see, the fact that that's
The
the last
integrated
one,
assertions, theories, and aims. That's pretty vague, but direct.
No,
I
I think that ties into what Luke's definition, but the first two seem to tie into my definition. But Luke, I think that's to your point about what part of the problem is the fact that ideology, as defined by, that was Merriam-Webster, right?
Yeah.
It's basically like what I was saying. It's just a belief system in terms of
Sure.
Political
Sure.
philosophy
Okay.
or whatever, which should be fine. Like, I have no problem with having a conversation with the libertarian. I might not agree with everything that a libertarian says, but I'm friends with libertarians.
Sure, and I
love to talk to them.
I
They're
understand where they're coming from. Most importantly,
Totally. And oftentimes I'm like, yeah, that's a great point. And I mean, this is something I teach too, where there's different ways to argue and there's different reasons why you argue. It's not always that the person that you're arguing is wrong. Sometimes, yes, they have factually incorrect information, which is important to point out. But other times, it comes down to values. It comes down to,
And it's- yeah.
well, I think this is worth the cost. I think the benefit of this is worth the cost. And it's like,
Right.
neither one of those answers is necessarily right. It's just a different system of
well, so
values.
what you do is you get down
Yeah.
to the fundamentals, and so there are certain fundamentals where you disagree with someone on something. But what I see in politics right now and discourse right now is people don't even know what they disagree
And
about.
this is the version of ideology that you're referring
Yeah.
to. Which
I'm saying the ideologies are talking to each other, and the people aren't talking to each other.
And again, that's why, like I said, within any idea, like me talking to a normal libertarian, a much better conversation, a much more productive conversation than if you talk to anybody from any other group. Even, I mean, I lean more left typically,
Same.
but I would have a better conversation with a normal Republican, and I have, than I would with somebody on the extreme left.
Yeah.
Pretty much all the time.
Yeah.
in my
So, like,
experience.
I want to say, throw out there too, I would love to have a libertarian on as a guest. I love talking to
know
them
them.
about the FDA and the CDC.
That
and
would
how
be great.
terrifying privatized versions of them.
Yeah,
would
I
be.
wanna see you and
So I would
libertarians
love
just-
to have that because I'm actually
Yeah.
pretty libertarian in a lot of things, but it just
Sure.
falls apart at other stuff like
well,
sewer
there's a lot to
systems and things like that.
Yeah, there's a lot to it, but there's also a lot where I'm like, wait a minute, also this, and it's actually, but they tend to be like, I don't know. There's something there where it's like it's less kind of cemented as opposed to like the harder right. I find.
So, I mean, when
they
you
tend
say
to be
hard
open-minded.
right, I'm thinking like alt right, whatever. I'm thinking like these phrases, like I don't,
Well, I mean, this is where it gets slippery.
But-
Like, at what point do you start to say like, oh, you're alt right now? You're not just right.
Sure.
Like, you're alt right. Like,
Well-
this is the problem. Like, it's
Well,
hard
the
to
shit
draw
does
that line.
change every generation.
Sure,
too.
yeah,
Like,
totally.
You know, you get waves of politicians that people line up behind,
Yeah.
and it's hard to
actually
keep up
believe
with
or
what's
don't
what.
or whatever.
I do think the left is largely to blame for Trump, though.
Oh, I would
I
say
think
the
they
left is-
overplayed their hand,
I would
and
say
they're
the left is
continuing to
mostly to
overplay
blame,
their
yeah.
hand.
Totally.
And
Yeah.
I guess I didn't mention this at the beginning, because I called like one of the things in the beginning of this thing I wrote out, the left and the problem of numbers, because my point is I don't know to what extent this is a problem. I hear it from people who are on college campuses who say this is a fringe thing. It happens once in a while and gets a lot of media attention, but it's not a big deal. Like the
what does?
like various protest speakers being like kept from speaking,
Okay.
Antifa causing like $500,000 of costs and
Well, that's a good
damage
data
at
point.
Berkeley.
It's like,
you know,
how like prolific is that actually?
so that's a question I haven't found the answer to.
Yeah, sure.
I do know that there's no shortage of insane videos you can find on YouTube and various places on the internet that just have like the craziest shit you'll ever hear, and you won't believe that humans are actually saying that in the United States right now.
Right.
And it's scary to hear. Like, it's scary to know that there's someone named Christina Hoff Sommers, right? She's known online. I think her YouTube channel is called The Factual Feminist. And she's kind of pushing against third wave feminism and sort of the more extreme, like, just all men are evil brands of feminism. And just saying, like, hey, here are the facts. For example, why would you use the wage gap between men and women as a hinging point of your argument when that's just a dishonest figure? So you always hear the thing, women make, what is it, 77 cents to the
It's like
dollar?
70
That's what
something,
you
yeah.
hear.
That's what Obama said.
That's what Obama said, right?
He's the president, so
But when you look
true.
into that statistic, it's just a lie. It's just a clear misdirection. That statistic is meant to make you think that a woman and a man working at the exact same job in the exact same position, on average, the woman makes 78 cents, whereas a man would make $1, right?
Well, and that gets into,
That's what that statistic it makes you
Again,
think,
that-
right?
that-
But that's
it
not
would
what
be
the
like
statistic
saying-
is.
that becomes a whole Jordan Peterson thing too, where when he's I've seen videos where he's like pressed about this and he's asked about this, and his whole thing is like, well, yeah, there are certainly cases where women don't make as much as men for the same amount of work, but like you should identify those actual cases and call them out.
Well, and you should also use like actual true statistics and not mislead people with statistics. So, for example, that statistic is taking the population of men and the population of women and averaging out their salaries independent of what the career is, independent of part-time versus full-time. It's like, of course you would need to level all the other factors. That's how good statistics work, right? You have to know what factor you're actually measuring in any experiment or...
Let me stop you there for a
Oh,
moment.
God, Joe's in character.
yeah, you already lost me too.
So you're
Yeah,
saying
you're talking too much. You're using too many words instead of numbers. I like simple numbers.
that,
Like
that's
77 cents. That's 3/4.
That's a
Like,
phrase-
I know how much that is.
Is it, Johnny?
that's
You
a
know?
phrase we should get into as well. The so you're saying.
So we talked about that a little bit, but
Yeah.
one of the things that you'll hear a lot in bad arguments and conversations is you say something, and then the person will respond to what you didn't say with something like,
Well, that's
"Oh,
the-
so you're
that's
saying
the-
blah blah blah
that's
blah
the
blah."
infamous Kathy Newman Jordan Peterson interview.
Do you want to prep that as I pull it up, Joe?
Yeah,
I think
so-
that's a good window into.
It seems like a poor tactic though, because unless the person's
yeah.
just totally like like catch them off guard, you're giving them a chance to defend their point, which
Well, that's what.
I guess is a fair thing, but it seems bad if you're trying to gotcha someone.
Well,
you know?
that's exactly to your point, Johnny. That's exactly if you watch the Kathy Newman Jordan Peterson interview, like she went in with her talking points and not realizing that she didn't do enough homework.
Right.
Clearly.
One of the weird things. So I'm about to play a clip of this interview that this psychologist we've been talking about, Jordan Peterson. He got in a heap of trouble because
a
Canada
whole heap.
Canada passed a piece of legislation called C-16. I think Bill C-16 is what it was called. Yeah, and it basically put the use of like alternate gender pronouns into like the speech codes through the Ontario Human Rights Act, and basically, I'm no lawyer, but from what I could research, if you, let's say, were to not use someone's preferred pronoun, and maybe someone
If you
doesn't
were to
even know what
misgender
preferred pronouns
somebody,
are.
I think it's misgendering.
Misgendering,
So like if
but, I mean-
somebody, let's say you're a jerk, though. I think the intention of that law is, let's say you're a jerk
Sure.
and someone transitions, and everyone else in their life accepts them, and you
Right.
go out of your way to make sure to use their old pronoun.
Right.
Like you can get in trouble for that.
Sure.
That I think was the intent of passing it.
Well,
but
so and
his
Jordan,
main problem, I think, with it was that it's a compelled speech law, not about what it's compelling that.
it was
much,
less
'cause
about
I think-
the content of
Yeah,
what it
'cause
was
I think-
compelling, and the fact that like the government was passing a legislation that was compelling any kind of speech about anything.
Right, because he said he in his classroom would address anyone whatever they chose. They just had to let him know he didn't mind.
He always
just
said that, by the
didn't
way,
like
from the beginning.
Yeah, it's not like he's backtracking. I think he was always like that, but he didn't like the idea that they were passing a compelled, because that's the ultimate problem of free speech, hate speech. We were talking before, is who decides it. Somebody
Right.
has
The
to make
definition
the
of
call,
hate
and
is
that means
too vague.
somebody will disagree with them. Yeah,
Yeah.
So
Well, it
is
becomes a
kinda
line
scary.
that you have to like you have to draw, but it's like who decides that exactly?
Yeah, and before we play this, let me just like make it clear. Like, I like to think of myself as a kind person, and I really like a way of thinking that I heard from somebody named Eric Weinstein. Sorry, Weinstein. It's very hard to remember that name.
Yeah, not the serial rapist.
Not Harvey pronunciation. So this guy, Eric Weinstein, is someone I've followed for the past few months, and he set up a way of like, okay, what he called them were he called them derivatives. He said, when I look at my mind, I can sort of boil things down to a few main derivatives. Let's see if I can.
You don't have
I think I wrote his exact quote down.
Well, while you look for that, I had a quote.
Yeah, go for it.
You got it, Luke? No, okay. So my quote is, I got nothing.
Oh,
I thought I'd come up with something. I was gonna try to come up with a joke to fill his time.
I was really excited too.
Yeah, this episode's not funny. We got to put that in the intro. This is too serious.
I know.
This is
Can,
not
can
a
you
funny
crack
one.
some jokes, Mr. Genie? Can you lighten the mood a little bit?
we can.
What was the joke I told about?
I actually meant
Johnny's
to
chocolate pie before we started. How did that go?
I don't really have. Yeah, I don't really have. Many
I meant to say in the beginning, let's make a conscious effort to like keep it light at some point.
Yeah, but you gotta be careful with politics.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
So I think I can do this from memory. I couldn't find it in my phone. The Weinstein thing was, he's like, I think of like
Derivatives.
these derivatives, which are like places in the mind when you go really deep into the mind that you can't seem to go any further. And one of those categories was meaning, right? One of those categories was truth.
Okay.
One of those categories was
Pudding
fitness,
pie.
evolutionary
Try,
fitness.
Johnny.
I mean that in a scientific way.
Is he
So
eating green toast?
is that avocado? So fitness, right? Meaning evolutionary fitness means, is what I'm doing going to help me survive, right?
Yeah.
And then grace was his fourth category.
You can't gain grace.
Oh.
You either have grace or you don't.
You either have grace. So I don't even mean that kind of grace. I mean it in a more
That's
spiritual
a
way.
Seinfeld reference.
So the
Like
category
Francis Ford.
of, what was the first one I said?
Grace. Will.
I think it was dexterity.
It's pronounced hypodermis.
I'm barely holding on here, guys.
I know. Luke can't handle the two of us, Johnny. It's not gonna.
We got to
work.
be honest, guys. We're trying at the audience. We're trying to do a serious podcast, but we're still drinking beers like we do in.
Oh,
a
we didn't
normal
even announce
podcast.
the beers.
Yeah, that's true.
But we have been chugging beers since.
And I'm eating a sausage wrap right now.
Is that what that was? Why is it green?
Yeah, it's a spinach tomato wrap.
Oh, beautiful.
They're delicious.
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
Donate to us on Patreon, and we can just IV fluid ourselves.
Just play the fucking.
Instead of having to
Kathy
eat-
Newman
I
interview.
just wanted to say
on the-
before I play this thing, because like it's very easy to search Jordan Peterson's name and find
and just find like devil horns and,
awful
like-
devil horn things. So
Which I should say, I don't agree with everything he says. I think the problem is that everything that you find about him that people have trouble with on YouTube is the wrong things.
right,
It's like he says things sometimes where I'm like, actually, I disagree for these reasons.
but also if you want to disagree with him, you have to actually like counter something he actually.
Which I've seen
said.
in like legitimate interviews where somebody brings something up and he says, yeah, fair point.
Yeah,
And then
he
he
loves it.
discusses
In
it,
fact,
yeah.
like you can see the
Which is
wheels in
fine,
his
yeah.
mind really like almost enjoy when like somebody challenges his position, and sometimes he'll say, "Fair enough, I really don't know," and then sometimes he'll say, "Actually, yeah, you might think you just had a checkmate there, but
Yeah.
actually, blah blah blah."
Yeah.
But on the category of grace, so when you're seeking truth, it's just like, does objective truth exist? And if objective truth exists, then you can, as a human, make one of your goals to try and discover objective truth.
Well, and how do you define objective truth, though? Is that just what's best
Can we just table that for now?
We can try.
That's a big question.
And then on the meaning front, right? That's
mean, some
that's
people
what
might
gives
not
your
even know
life
what
meaning.
objective
What are
is, but
things
go
that
ahead.
makes you feel like life is meaningful? Those kind of things. Then you have the category of evolutionary fitness. And here's where evolutionary fitness deserves a category, Joe. Okay, you could have something you believe is true. Name me something you believe is an objective truth.
Watermelon. It's delicious.
Okay, somebody has a gun to your head, and
Love it.
you know that they're a watermelon extremist. And if you say you like watermelon, that they will shoot you. Now they hold a gun to your head and they say, "What do you think of watermelon?"
Fucking hate it.
You're gonna not tell the truth there, right?
Yeah, fucking
because
hate it.
evolutionary fitness trumps that truth telling.
I don't think it's evolutionary fitness. I think it's I want to
Surviving.
stay alive so I
That's
can eat
common
more watermelon.
sense, yeah.
More
I
fucking
wanna
delicious
Yeah,
survive
but
so I
Joe,
can eat
that is
watermelon.
evolutionary fitness, staying alive.
No, I just want watermelon. You're not getting
That's
this,
right.
Luke.
And then grace is this category, and Eric Weinstein used this category of grace to talk about gender pronouns. He goes, I will extend the grace of calling somebody by whatever pronoun they might want, so long as I feel like they deserve that grace. He goes, it's not an unlimited category where they get to demand that I do what they want. That's just a power game, right? He
Talk
said,
about manners.
so it's not so much that it's in the
called
category
manners.
of objective truth, right?
Oh, so you're saying it's more like I see what you're saying. So it's like
It's like it doesn't deserve to be in the category of like, is this objective truth? Because you see people on the left when they're talking about gender and sex and biology, like they take the parts of science that they like and they leave out the parts that they don't like.
Well, it's like as like a professor where sometimes students call me Mr. Labriola, and I'm like, yeah, whatever. Like, you know, you can call me whatever you want. Like, I might prefer you call me this. Whereas, if you're on that other side, you might interpret that as like, oh, you didn't call me Mr. Labriola. You basically called me dickhead.
Sure. And so, like, let's say somebody...
Mr. L,
Oh, I've gotten Mr. L.
In terms of the
Hard.
gender pronouns, right?
Mr. Labalola.
For some, it's just
Yeah,
like
that's it.
a he becomes a she or a she becomes a he. And it's like, fair enough. You know, I have no problem with that. But there's also like lists of
But why
30
do you-
to 50 to 70 different pronouns that sometimes are constantly changing.
But why do you need to legislate that? Like, I have students.
I don't think you do need to
No,
legislate it.
I do have a quote for this.
I'm not saying not to do it. I'm just saying, like, because I have students all the time. Like, the first thing I ask them when I learn their names is like, do you prefer a different name?
Sure.
And it's
what
like,
do you want to be called?
it's
What,
like,
what's most
yeah,
natural
you want to
for
be
you?
called Kenny
Yeah,
G.
that's when you get to
Like,
know
I'll call you
someone.
Kenny
That's-
G. I don't give a fuck. Like, that's fine. But like, that doesn't need to be. That's just me being like a courteous person.
Yeah.
So
Cur-
that's-
I go
Grace,
by the
courteousness, yeah.
equivocator.
What, Johnny?
They call me the equivocator.
But you see my
That's a
point.
fancy way of
Yeah.
saying I bullshit a lot.
all of this was just to say that like there's controversy surrounding Jordan Peterson, but one key point of evidence, and this is something that people attack him don't admit, which is he never said he would not use gender pronouns that a student asked him to use.
Right.
All he said was he was against the compelled speech mandates that were being put into the Ontario Human Rights Code through this Bill C-16.
Well, so his point would be that regardless of what the compelled speech is, he's against the fact
and
of
it just happened
Yeah.
to be this.
I see.
And
Okay.
you know, he does speak out against this because written into the law now is this idea that biological sex, gender, and what's called gender expression are totally independent. And it's like that's just factually untrue. There are cases, obviously. I think transgender is a real phenomenon, but there are cases. I mean, there are cases of that, right? But for the majority of the statistics, like your biological sex and your gender are correlated.
So the best
I'm gonna leave that up
example of
to you.
that is that Texan wrestler, right?
Who?
I think started as a male, right?
Oh,
And
so you're
transitioned
talking
to
about
female,
that's a category,
and then
yeah.
won a state championship, but as a woman, I think, or whatever.
It was
I
a
should have more
biological
details.
male that transitioned to be a
Yeah.
woman, but that competed in a wrestling. I mean, this has happened with a few different sports. Like when you have biological men who then transition to become women that are arguing to compete in the women's division
and-
of sports
and you
or
can-
whatever.
and you can
So
take
yeah,
that as-
I'm picking the physical aspect because that's the most like.
Right, and so
obvious
like
difference.
to the extremists
But
on the
the-
left, they would say there is no difference. Like now they're a woman. It's like, well,
They were always a woman.
Well, if there's
they
no-
just
if-
now are expressing themselves as that.
Well, if
way.
there's no
That's
difference-
the farthest.
Then why would you have a woman's and a men's? to begin
well.
with?
So the point is, there obviously is a biological difference between men and women. Men, on average, are taller than women. Does that mean there are no women that are taller than any man? No, but on average.
That-
so
that-
people
that was a
don't
good-
understand the
that was a
phrases
good-
like on average.
That was a good. I saw a clip of Joe Rogan. And he's like, yeah, there are women who would like beat your ass. Like I
Of
know
course.
like, fighters.
I could name like probably like 5 that I know that I wouldn't like.
Oh no, I know women who it's like
Yeah.
they would mop the floor with me.
I would just say the argument, with the wrestler issue is on the other side was saying it's not fair. Isn't that it's their choice is illegitimate? It's that they had 18, 16 years, whatever, of male hormones, which cause different developmental things than female, and that's the science you're saying some people choose to reject, right?
Right, and I think
just to wrap that
what
up.
what I guess what generally concerns me is that the left is generally embedded in academics, and I always thought of myself as being on the left because the left was the party that stood by science, and science is objective and is editable and all of those things. And what I notice coming from the left is that they will reject science if it's not agreeing with their ideology. And that's coming back to the definition of ideology, is this idea that even if the reality around you is telling you from every angle that you might be on the wrong path, you stay on that path and you force reality to be your ideology.
That's definition C, though, but it's becoming definition A. Maybe.
Sure.
That's the problem. Yeah.
So,
right.
anyways, this is a roundabout way to just kind of introduce the Jordan Peterson thing.
Just play the clip. I'm dying, man. I
But
wanna hear
anyways,
it.
funny enough, this clip is
I've heard
she's accusing him of the gender pronoun thing, and is asking, what does this have to do with free speech? And he kind of stops her in her tracks. Just
To
for
be
some
fair, in
context-
her defense,
Yeah.
Jordan Peterson, he's great, but he gets a little long-winded. And he has like 30,000 hours or some crazy shit.
he does have a lot of
videos.
content. Yeah.
So for her to like wade through it enough to get to figure it out, like I get it that she couldn't.
I don't
be
think she
bothered.
waded
She's probably
deep
a busy
enough,
person.
though.
Well,
And she didn't
yeah.
expect
I
him to
think in
come
this case she
prepared.
was told an angle to play, and she played that angle,
Well,
and she's probably used to it working.
And it totally
He says-
backfired.
I've seen in another interview where he says before their interview they met like in the green room or whatever, and she was like totally friendly, like they had a great conversation, like he was really looking forward to the interview, and then it started and he was like totally different
And then she
person.
changed on a dime. Yeah.
Just like not
So
what
let's
he
play it.
expected. Yeah.
Let's play it.
So, by the way, this is about 20 minutes into her berating him with everything he says. She says, so you're saying this, so you're saying that, like accusing him of saying sexist things, and he's constantly just trying to like tread his path very carefully without like, misstepping. And so finally at this point, she tries to corner him with something, and he really, anyways, I'm just going to hit play.
Play.
And this is, you got in trouble for refusing to call trans men and women by their preferred personal pronouns.
No,
I want to
that's
ask-
not actually true. I got in trouble because I said I would not follow the compelled speech dictates of the federal and provincial government. I actually never got in trouble for not calling anyone anything.
Right.
That didn't happen.
You wouldn't follow the change of law, which was designed
Not
to
once it was
outlaw
law.
discrimination.
No.
Why
Well,
should
that's
your...
what they said it was designed to do.
Okay, you cited freedom of speech in that. Why should your right to freedom of speech trump a trans person's right not to be offended?
Because in order to be able to think, you have to risk being offensive. I mean, look at the conversation we're having right now. Like you're certainly willing to risk offending me in the pursuit of truth. Why should you have the right to do that? It's been rather uncomfortable.
Well, I'm very glad I put you on the spot. Well, I'm very glad that I have
but you
exercised
get
my
my
fuck-
point.
he fucking
You
got
get
her
my
there.
point. It's like you're doing what you should do, which is digging a bit to see what the hell's going on.
So
and
do
that is
you-
what you should do. But
And
you're
you
exercising
see-
your freedom of speech to certainly risk offending me. And that's fine. I think more power to you as far as I'm concerned.
And
So
here's
you
where she
haven't
gets
sat
stuck.
there and I'm just trying to work that out. I mean,
Ha, gotcha.
you have got me. I'm trying to.
I love when he pauses for a second and then
He's
goes,
such a fucking Canadian right
Yeah.
there. He like can't be mean about it. He's just like, ha, gotcha.
Yeah.
Like, oh,
I gotcha,
that's
didn't
funny.
I?
He's like, oh, I bet you feel silly. Like he just can't. I wish he was a little bit more of a dick about
But-
it. It would have been. He should have been
No,
like, yeah,
no.
bitch. That would have been.
I
great.
mean, like, yeah, that would have been like,
go full Jesse Pinkman.
that would have been
Yeah,
funny
bitch.
for sure.
I mean, that's one angle.
But one of the things I loved about that is you got to see that the whole interview, and I recommend everybody watch the whole thing so it doesn't feel like we're putting it out of context or anything. For any of the stories we bring up on this episode, I think like I just encourage you to go do your own research about it, because when you're not trying to deliberately mislead people and you just want the facts to be the facts, like every word I say on this podcast, I am open to changing my mind on, right?
You can just say it, Luke. We're assholes, so you guys shouldn't trust us.
What I mean to say is that, like, go watch this whole interview, and in that moment, it was almost like you got to see it break. Like, she was just not even being herself, saying what she was saying. And then in that moment, she realized that, like the video game broke. Like, the rules of the ideology she was following broke, and she didn't know what to do because it was like a robot that self-contradicted itself or something.
Because the follow-up question, she said, because you wouldn't follow the law, you wouldn't call. He goes, no, I actually never did that. Her response was to be, well, you did once it became law. Like, she thought that it was a technical thing, like, oh, well, you did after or something, and it was like, oh, shit, no, he's getting me on something totally different.
Right.
Like, she didn't even understand where he was coming from until he did be like, yeah.
This comes back.
She just froze.
This comes back to the polarization and the fact that when this just becomes like a power game as opposed to like what the actual problem is. I think what you're, I mean, I don't want to say like what she's actually realizing or not, but it seems like in the context of like what we're seeing with this kind of breakdown, like you say, of the kind of like, oh, I'm trying to get you, and then she realizes that he got her because there's really not much to it. Is that what he's been characterized as or categorized as is as this like alt character, right? And it turns out that he's actually not. Like, he's not part of that.
He's a first
problem.
principle thinker.
Well, and he brings up, if you go to the rest of this interview, like, he's trying to point to like what the actual problems are. Like, when in the rest of the interview, like, he talks about like, yeah, no, there are certainly like women who aren't paid as much much money as men for the same job, and I help them, figure out how to negotiate to get paid more.
I like how he's like, I'm actively studying why.
Yeah,
and you're calling me a piece of shit for having an opinion about it.
Yeah, he's like, he's like, that's my job.
That's one of the things that like the main points
he's like,
I realized.
It is a problem, but that's the problem that you want to actually point to.
It's like, no, people like him
get people to work on
not
it.
only recognize the problems, but they're smart enough to possibly see the problem and come up with a solution that is actually workable, let's say, something like that. Something that I've noticed on the left is that if you agree on the values, right, let's say of equality of opportunity for all people regardless of race, gender, all these things, right? If you agree on those values, but you disagree on the methods, right, then you're ousted. You're out of the club. And one of the things the left does more than probably the right is they kick their own out. And that's the first sign of cult-like thinking, is when it kicks their own out. When you're not pure enough, when you're not ideologically pure enough, you get kicked out. Most of these people that, like Jordan Peterson,
Mormons?
he considers himself a classical liberal, right? Brett Weinstein was the guy at Evergreen State College with this controversy all about... well, gosh, that's a whole story in and of itself.
He defined himself as a progressive back in like the 80s, and now he's like, I don't think so. Like, it's scary.
Well, I mean,
they all hate me also.
I think he still considers himself a progressive in the sense like he's a classical liberal, like, but he wouldn't consider himself like on the left, let's say, right?
Well, that's what's interesting is that these definitions change. Like you say, in terms of ideology, it's like how much of the far left is part of... Like, where do you transition from mainstream left to, like, far left? Or, like, mainstream right to alt-right? Like, whatever you want to call it or define it.
And at the end of the day, those are just categories, right?
Sure.
And what do I hate about categories the most is that, and I include SJW in this, and in the intro to this little thing I wrote out, I wrote right away...
what SJW is.
I wrote right away that that I even hate having to use the phrase SJW because I hate the idea of categorizing anybody as anything, because what you do is you set up your brain to be biased so that the next time you encounter somebody,
Well, it's
if
very
they
tribal.
seem to be like SJW or they
Yeah.
say that, then
heard
you're going to
them, yeah.
assume that you know everything
But
about
who
them.
defines
And-
SJW?
Wait,
Like, is that a
I thought
self-identified
it stood for
group?
I thought it stood for schizophrenic Java workers. Is that not right?
Jawas?
But-
like
no,
I thought that's who. Yeah, Java workers. I thought that's who I was
But-
looking out for.
So SJW
Like, who
means
defines
social
this?
justice warrior, and well, so there's a few definitions of it, but generally it's
But do
now
they call themselves that? Like, is it a term of endearment?
or is it
like-
a pejorative
yeah.
thing? Yeah.
I would say
Is it like being called
I
a
would say
pinko or a commie?
It used to be a term that people would proudly wear, and I think some people still do, but it's now also a pejorative term for people
Okay.
who are combating against that.
Get on, call Merriam
Hmm.
and Webster. Can we get a ruling on this?
I think Webster is wasted, but I'll see if Miriam's still up. what do you want from me? That's
exactly
Who
what
the
I
fuck
want
am I?
from you.
Don't tell me.
Johnny's
what
like, I got a beer in one hand, I got like my microphone in the other hand.
Yeah, Johnny's wrong.
Yeah, I'm at capacity over here. You can figure it out.
I'm at capacity.
I'm at
He's genie in
capacity.
So I hate categories of all kinds, right? Like if I tell you, okay, let me give you an example. Now, in my personal life, I was in a situation that if I knew what I knew now, I would have interpreted it totally differently, you know? But at the time, I was just so very confused because I would with
So what you're saying, Luke, is domestic violence.
I've already-
Should they
I've
keep
already
their guns
blown it.
or not?
I've
Let's
already
go.
blown it, Johnny.
Yes or no?
Yeah.
Yes or no?
all I said was I had a friend, and then like I
Absolute or more absolute. Those
Sorry,
are your
go
two
ahead.
options.
Go back to what your point was. I'm sorry.
if I knew what I knew now, I like I've since gone back and
Yeah.
of course hindsight is 2020, right?
Yeah, sure.
But
well, this is how you learn exactly like
Sure.
those lines and sort of.
I would have
the
these
blurriness
like
between them. Yeah.
like vicious like disagreements with a particular person, and it sort of became like an end of a friendship kind of thing. And I didn't realize at the time that it was sort of like just a like we were getting at before, like there was a fundamental difference in what lens to view reality through.
It was different games.
Different games.
Totally different games.
And
yeah.
but the tactics
In terms of
that
the
were
outcomes, yeah,
played
the
against
goals.
me were very similar to what I see SJWs doing on the internet, which is they don't engage with what you actually said. They project what they quote unquote heard and then react against
Well,
that.
don't you feel like too to some extent, because I feel like what you're saying is it all feels.
I have a quote for this.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Joe, but it explains exactly what Luke's trying to say. Okay,
Oh God.
He's not ready.
getting the notepad out.
Oh, he's got the legal pad.
People see something they don't like and expect it to stop, as opposed to deal with their own emotions. Guess what 21st century philosopher said that?
Eminem. No.
Johnny the Genie.
Ricky Gervais
That's pretty close.
and his new special, Humanity. It was really,
Yeah.
He had some good points in there. He makes like a Hitler joke or he makes a Jesus joke like a minute and a half in. He doesn't give a fuck. It was good that way at least.
He's always been like a voice to speak out against bullshit wherever it's coming from.
Yeah.
Yeah, he says what he says.
But yeah, I think that describes the SJW. What like that group gets lumped on because we're generalizing the fuck.
And
out
I
of
hate
this
generalizing, and
disclaimer
I
for
think one of the
everybody.
things
Yeah.
that
You kind of have
is-
to have a
but that's what
discussion.
these extremes do.
But I
They
think a
generalize.
fundamental thing that is against any extreme ideology is view people as individuals. It doesn't mean statistics is not real. Like
Yeah.
male and female are two categories of statistics, but it doesn't tell you about anything about how to judge an individual that you're dealing with. But it does tell you that the population of male and female that there are a bimodal distribution of traits between men and women.
That was a fancy word you just said.
Bimodal means that, you know, the bell curve
There's
of
two modes
statistics.
for it, right?
means there are two bell curves on various traits that you could curve or graph. Back to the story. I was with these former friends, and just to speak to the fact that people often don't even... We were at a bar, and we were talking to the bartender, having a lovely chat. The guy was really nice, right?
Yeah, checks out.
And then the bartender mentioned, "Oh, I'm going to this city," right? I'll leave all the,
Yeah,
things
leave
nameless.
the
but,
proper nouns out.
And then we were like, oh, that city, it's a great city. Like, I've been there a lot. Like, blah, blah, blah. And we talked for another few minutes about how awesome the city is. And then finally the question goes, what brings you to that city? Like, why are you going there? And he was like, oh, there's a Young Republicans convention there. And then Ghost White turned the faces of these extremist people that I was with. And then when the bartender went to the back to do whatever, they were like, oh my God, he's a Republican. Like, there's a Republican here. I'm like, what? Like, what's the problem? Like, you don't know him. He seems like a reasonable guy. Didn't we just talk to him for 10 minutes and he seemed really nice? Like, he's probably just
understand, Luke.
He probably just differs on opinion about various things, and maybe it's even a valid opinion. Maybe you could learn something. But it was like, oh my God, we just talked to the other side. Like, this is insane. I was like, oh, that's the mark of an ideology.
Let me guess. So the guy came back and said, hey, and the first thing they went thinking, dead babies, for him or against them, go.
No, it was more
put him on the
like,
spot.
oh, like, we're just going to be awkward and cold towards that guy now. You know?
But that's to the larger point of, like, not being able to engage.
I thought that's
right
in any sense.
And
right?
like, to me, I get excited to talk to somebody who has a different opinion. Not always. When I was younger, I was different. Like, I definitely got better at it as I got older.
Well, that it's sort of like I was talking to you about this the other day. This idea of, in terms of like religion, for example, about how, like, I have such better conversations with, because I have students where I teach who are Muslim. And I have such better conversations with, like, moderate Muslims and moderate Christians than either of the extremes, obviously, right? And something that I notice in just, like, the way that they talk about their values, whether they're moral or, you know, ideas of, like, virtuousness or just, like, being a good person or whatever, way more in common with the normal moderate people, whether they're, again, Christian, Muslim, atheist, agnostic, than the extremes of either of the rest of their groups. And there's something there. There's really something there.
Well, I would argue that's true for any...
Everything in moderation, isn't that what people say?
I mean, there's something to that.
Well, I think what you're saying more is that you pick anybody and choose whichever one factor you might be different on. Yeah. You have more things in common, right?
Well, you have more things in common in terms of, like, what are you really getting at? Like, what do you really care about?
What's your end game?
Yeah, like, what do you really value? And it's like, if you look at that, it's like, oh yeah, you just happen to be raised as a Muslim or as a Christian or as an atheist or, you know, whatever the case. But, like, if you're, like, a person who's has their head wrapped around doing the right things for the right reasons and being open-minded and that sort of thing, it's like, I have the same conversations in terms of, like, oh yeah, like, I even have conversations with people where they're like, yeah, they legitimately believe in heaven and hell as, like, those very solidified concepts of, like, you go to heaven or you go to hell.
Right.
In different religions. But they'll tell me, like, oh, I don't think just because you're that other religion that you're going to hell. Like, are you a good person? And it's like, it seems to correlate with other factors of having conversations with them where I'm like, yeah, I think the idea of heaven and hell is ridiculous personally, but I can still have a normal conversation with you about a lot of other stuff.
Although, comes down to definitions again.
Of course, yeah. I mean, definitions are huge. And in fact, what somebody's describing as heaven and hell from each individual person is going to be different from one person to another, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I have a couple of friends who I think are pretty sure the planet's like 6,000 years old. Like, they're that level of, like, evolutionary theory where they land on that spectrum.
Yeah.
And they're, like, totally normal, reasonable people I enjoy hanging out with. Mm-hmm. But, like, I just can't talk about it with them. You can talk about it with them. They don't get upset or offended if you're reasonable.
But that's the difference.
Which I was kind of laughing about. I was like, really? And, like, we could talk about it. I was like, all right, that's cool, man. Like, it's fine. But I was like, seriously? You're not just fucking with me?
What do we say
all
to
right,
our
whatever.
fans who think the world's 6,000
like, I just didn't.
old?
As long as you don't get hateful and judgy about it, like, it's fine. I was just like, okay, it doesn't affect my life if that's really how you.
Yeah.
How you
Are you going to be a
like,
dick
I
to
don't
me?
care.
Like.
Yeah, like, it
as
doesn't
long
change
as you're not a dick to me about it, like,
you're not
going to
suddenly change over how we
Joe,
talked
if
the
you move
last
your
10
mic
minutes.
to
Yeah,
this
it's fine then.
right side, because you keep talking to me and then it cuts out.
Am I cutting out?
Yeah.
All right.
Like, move it to your... all right. So, Johnny, have you seen that Jordan Peterson video where he gets asked, do you believe in God?
Maybe, I don't know.
What do you think his first sort of I don't know, like just retort to that without answering it yet was?
I have no idea.
He said, "Depends what you mean by God, and depends what you mean by believe."
Of course he does, yeah.
But it's like fair enough. It's like gets back to the definition problem of like, yeah, well, what do you mean by God? Do you mean like a guy in the sky, an entity in the sky that's just watching over, or do you mean like, something personal inside yourself or whatever? And it's like all of these questions, like when you get to the really complicated questions, which includes anything political and like how to structure a society so that it serves the most people and the most, in the best ways, they're complicated questions, and it really matters what words mean. And I see so many of these like awful conversations going down online where they're only failing because the people are working off of different definitions and assuming different things, and they're just talking past each other. It's like, blah, instead of, actually connecting and hearing this person and then responding and hearing and responding.
I mean, I think we've talked about this, and we're an example of it, of publishability. Like, we have no right to be able to put our thoughts out. Like, this is probably all drivel, but we have the ability and the technology to do it, and people can find it. So everyone's voice, they all feel that
power in a way.
That legitimacy or credibility. Like, I'm doing it. I'm actually saying it. Like, it's just as valid as that asshole on TV doing it. And it is in a lot of ways, but then it gets crazy once you start doing that or you start having that.
Well, it can...
Oh, man, shit's so crazy right now. Can we talk about... Let me know... We're pretty far in. I want to know when we can talk about actual, like, current politics. Because I don't know if you guys watched that CNN at all. But what is this, Monday? But I just learned last night that President Trump raw dogged a porn star when he was 60 years old in a hotel room, which
I
is
saw
crazy.
that at the gym. I was like, Jesus Christ.
Does that mean that he
Like, I was like, is this
melting
Anderson
syphilis?
Cooper?
Wait, what's the best part is that barely anybody cares. It's like, yeah.
No
duh.
one gives a fuck. But Anderson Cooper is like being like, and did he have a condom? Oh, he didn't. Okay. And they just is like, what the fuck am I watching?
Like,
What's
the president
happening?
raw dog some hooker. It's like, did he have a condom? That matters.
Hey, she's not a hooker.
Well, no,
all right?
it
Prostitute?
matters if
She took.
It matters if his mind is actually melting from
What was she?
syphilis.
She was a porn star that, like, from the interview, it sounded like she was uncomfortable and thought she was going to get a TV deal out of it. But that's me projecting. I think she's a porn star, though, who went to his hotel room and ended up banging him and said she didn't really want to, but she did anyways.
So on the Trump,
It was an interesting interview.
on the Trump
I
thing,
liked
how do you
Kurt
handle
Schwarzenegger
bizarre
how do you handle
reality
Trump
we live
news in general? Like, this is just one of like literally, like every day is a new Trump headline. That's just insanity.
I think his kid was like a couple of months old at the time she's alleging it.
It's just so much
and
noise.
It's like
with him.
this might be the thing. This is what people that have been like not my president people since the beginning, the impeached Trump people, have been like, oh, this is the way to get him because, like, if he gave money, that counts as a campaign contribution thing because it helped the campaign. Like, we can nail him on that. Like, they're trying to, like, Watergate it and, like, find, like, a way to make procedure, like, the cover-up's worse than the crime. We got you kind of thing.
Yeah.
People are, like, actively trying to get
dude,
him.
I'm
It's
on
such a
board.
crazy time to be alive.
I'm on
It's so
board.
hard
I get,
to
like,
think about this stuff.
So you
At
have
this point,
the Trump like phenomenon.
it's so bizarre.
It's so bizarre. It's so bizarre.
Think about, remember in grade school, like, going through the history textbook, and you see, like, oh, all the old presidents, look, in the 1800s, they had all these crazy beards and mustaches.
And then Trump hair.
And then the 20th century, you have, like, Kennedy, like, yeah, he banged hookers too, but, like, he had nice combed hair. And then, like, and then you get up to, like,
Can you imagine fucking
all of a sudden
Reagan
Trump,
or
you get a page
Kennedy?
of Trump just like on the page, like
Can you imagine Kennedy in fucking McDonald's on Air Force One and shit? Even like,
Kennedy just
like
snorting
that
coke,
kinda
banging
stuff.
Marilyn Monroe and eating Big Macs.
That
is
was
what he did.
presidential. It was the '60s, bro. you
Well,
know?
the 60s were a
It was a-
different time. That was Mad Men.
different time.
You know
Trump
what-
would have done better in Mad Men.
Do you know what I
times,
heard
for
said
sure.
about Trump recently? That was it was on a Sam Harris podcast. He said if Trump were like half as bad as he is, he would seem 10 times worse. In other words, because Trump is just so unabashedly awful, everything, it just, all the signal gets lost in the noise.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, the evangelicals are still behind him. It's crazy.
No, his approval rating has gone
he
up.
constantly says
Republicans.
says creepy shit about his hot daughter.
Like, where the fuck are these
like
conservative value Republicans? Where the fuck are they?
Right. And so
He's
here's
on his
our,
third
here's our
Imagine,
marriage. It's
apply
nuts.
Obama
Yeah.
to this story.
right.
Put
It's so
Obama
weird.
in this position. How does that
Which
narrative?
one? Name one. Name
any
one.
of them. Take your pick. How does that narrative play on Fox News like 5 years ago? Like,
Right.
let's be realistic.
But Joe,
here.
this really because like this is a common
come on.
political tactic is to play the hypothetical card, is to say somebody makes a truth claim, right, on one side,
But I'm
and
just
the
saying-
other side says, aha, but when your side did it, you didn't care
Yeah.
about it, so therefore it's
The-
not a
so-
truth claim.
I would
It's
have
like,
cared if Obama had been
So
banging
really,
porn
Luke, the
stars
important
lying
question
about it.
here is not what would, like, imagine if this happened to Obama, is imagine what would happen to the next president if he's a Democrat if this happened.
Sure.
Because that's really what matters. What if it's not
it
a
happens
scandal
on
for
the-
them?
it happens with the
what,
left,
what if we
too,
can
of
have?
course, yeah,
you
yeah.
know, what if we get President Kid Rock and he could just get hammered in the White House and do a press briefing where he just sings some Guns N' Roses and be like, all right, I'm done, and that's it, and doesn't make what if we end up with that, and that's okay because it's
But
well,
you
he's less
remember the
aggressive than
shit that
Trump was.
Hannity would
what if we get that
bash
shit?
Obama on?
Right, yeah.
Well,
just imagine if, I think
on.
we've already said this on the air before, but imagine if Obama had said, grab him by the pussy. Just imagine.
Just imagine. I'm not saying.
Just imagine.
I'm not saying.
He did admit to doing cocaine, but
He also
Yeah, but he
admitted
was
to
so
doing heroin,
cool.
I
Have
think,
you
too.
seen that picture of him in that hat?
yeah, he was a cool. He was a cool.
He was so cool as he
smart
was
fuck
drone
black
striking
dude at Harvard.
hospitals.
Yeah.
back
Look,
in the day.
I mean,
of course, he's
it-
gonna have fun.
Okay. I'm hyperventilating.
But that's my point. Is I can look at Obama and say yeah, he wasn't perfect, but
That's the
Look at
difference.
Trump.
That's the difference.
a lot of people they think Obama and they think, oh yeah, that was basically Jesus in the White House, and it's well, no, I don't think
No one's perfect, but also that's an insane job. So I would
Of
be
course.
surprised if anybody could do it anywhere close to perfect.
I would be surprised if anybody could do it anywhere close to well, which most people don't.
And
most
fair
presidents
enough.
Suck.
And this gets back to the whole thing we said in the beginning about suffering. It's fact about life. Life is suffering. It will involve suffering whether it's now or late, right?
Yeah.
Fact one. Fact two. Humans are very, very imperfect, and almost definitely, no matter what system is in place, it will have flaws, and those flaws will come out, and then it will be really ugly until we figure out how to fix those flaws without making it worse.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times we try and fix bad things, but the fix just ends up making it worse, right?
Yeah.
And so you can't say, aha, the system's not perfect, therefore my ideology wins, right? On either side, whether it's right
Well,
or left.
again,
you have to
to your
admit
point,
that
it's-
we're trying our best, and it's better than it's ever been.
It shouldn't be about ideology. It should be about doing.
Luke's getting worked up.
Luke's getting
I kind of like when Joe got back from the bathroom. I feel like we just hit the right blood alcohol content for this episode.
Wait, Johnny, watch this. Watch this one. I don't think it's better than it's ever been.
I could show you some statistics, Joe. I'm calmly telling you.
He's seething up. He's foaming.
He's
out his
losing it.
mouth
He's
right?
losing it. He's angry. He's angry that you didn't get him angry. That's what
I
he's
kind
upset
of am.
about. Is you didn't give him anything. I thought he's going to be real bad. He went the other way. Fuck you.
Yeah.
Well-
no, it's just what he's
That's
saying.
what happens with
is
this stuff.
patently
Though.
false.
It gets
but
your
go
blood
ahead,
up.
Luke,
It
keep
gets the
talking.
blood up. That's a real thing.
So Johnny, earlier today I was
Everyone in the country's got their blood up right
I
now.
was
It's not
I was
good. No
I was
bueno.
at my girlfriend's house and I was practicing a little bit, playing some trumpet, and then I was like, oh, I want to find some YouTube
Is that what
clips.
you guys call it?
And so
That is what he calls it.
and so I was going through and
Watch and
watching
subscribe.
some of these YouTube videos, trying to find this or that, SJW type videos to showcase. And
Yeah, you're hateful.
her first
material.
comment was can you just put headphones on, just stop that noise. I'm my blood pressure is rising just hearing it, right? And I think for people when they're in that, they're addicted to the anger, they're addicted to the outrage. It almost becomes like a drug, right?
Well, I think that's what's happening with that far left now too. Is that and I think when we grew up, the far right was so good at like dominating the narrative, especially when you get into like
playing this game. Yeah.
And American values, and like, well, if you disagree, you're not an American, you're not patriotic.
They nailed it for like 20 years with that one.
Nailed it. And then like there's like this is a counter reaction to that, and it's funny. It all seems to be about extremes and counter reactions, and like ironically, that's how Trump gets elected.
It's a big tennis game.
Yeah, it's a shitty tennis game.
A
It's
really
like the
shitty
worst
one
kind of
that
tennis
like
game.
ends in like the
Where
world
no one wins.
Nuclear holocaust.
nuclear
Yeah.
holocaust.
money.
Yeah.
And no one wins, and every time you hit the ball, the price goes up.
Yeah, Trump's like, my rocket dick's bigger, and Kim Jong Un's like, my rocket dick's bigger in Korean, however the fuck that sounds, and then we just all die.
Guess how much faster the last $1 trillion was added to the national debt?
27 minutes.
If your guess is exponentially, then you are
I was
correct.
close.
And it's really bad.
I was-
what are you gonna do? We might as well just have go through a Trump
Buy more
era.
tennis balls.
It's like the
apparently
the world
It's crazy.
is such a fucking complicated place, right?
so many moving parts. There's 8 billion fucking people running around fucking things up constantly.
and each other.
And we're all
each other.
we're all somewhat selfish, obviously, but we also all have this software
I think we're all
package in our
selfish.
mind of like we know we have to work together. We know we can't survive on our own.
But
right?
that's only so that we survive. I kind of subscribe.
well,
to
everything's only so that we
no,
survive.
that's what I mean. I kind of subscribe to the theory that everything you do is selfish. How's it not?
So, yeah, fair enough. Like, even in biology, when they talk about
Yeah.
altruism, right?
Totally, yeah.
Let's say
it all comes back.
Let's say your brother, good old Johnny Genie,
Yeah,
falls in a frozen lake or something.
yeah,
When you go and dive in to save him, it's putting yourself at risk, right?
right,
But you're saving a lot of your genes while you do it, right?
right. Like
Now
I wouldn't do that for a random
And that's your
stranger
brother.
as much. Maybe
You wouldn't do it as much, but you still might, right?
Right.
And even if you saved a random stranger, you're saving Homo sapien DNA.
Right. Yeah, you can like zoom out in
Yeah.
categories. Yeah.
Well, it's like, where do you draw your family circle? Do you draw it
Right,
at
yeah.
your brother, or do you
Right.
draw it at humans, or even a banana? You have 60% of the same DNA as a banana.
I didn't say anything. I said shit to that.
Yeah, Joe just gave me a face when I said the banana thing. I was just like,
Yeah, I kind of froze up there. I was like, Luke, where are you
froze
going
up-
with this, buddy?
you froze up
Where are
like
you
a
going?
frozen banana, Joe.
Have you had a frozen banana?
My friend asked me if I wanted a frozen banana, and I said no, but I want a regular banana later. So yeah,
And then you did it?
that's a Mitch Hedberg joke.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't just steal.
No, I mean I said it. I didn't try to pretend it
Johnny
was
came back
mine.
with a hat.
I'm cold. I'm in a basement. Coming to you from the bunker.
He's in the bunker.
Call it that.
So like,
Even though there's a window right there.
here's a few things I think I can say confidently, and I hope anybody.
1, you hate babies. 2, not so keen on the other minorities. 3,
Well,
Mars first, Earth second. 4, what's your next radical view? Radical income
let me just say this, and like
redistribution
Joe, maybe
based on musical ability. You fucking
maybe Joe or Johnny, you disagree, and like that.
I totally disagree,
and/or
but go ahead, say what
if
I haven't
anybody
heard yet.
listening like might disagree with this.
Joe preemptively disagrees. I'm going to side.
If
with
you
him
listen to this
solidarity.
podcast,
We
hopefully,
both
like
disagree.
you think that
Well,
like
I
we're
wouldn't
decent
I
people.
wouldn't want to agree with you on everything. Why would I? That would be
Well,
a
no,
boring
of course not.
conversation.
I'm saying like let's say somebody who listens to this podcast thinks we're decent people, but is about to disagree with something I might say. Like I encourage you to like before the
Yeah, no, say your next racist law.
emotional reaction might like pop up of like, oh, this is just like consider that like, whoa, like step back.
Luke, what do you really want to
Oh,
say,
I
Luke?
like we already said it, but I'm just saying more explicitly. Like hate speech is free speech.
So you
Full stop.
So you should be able to say whatever you want whenever you want. That's what you're saying.
That's not what I said, Joe.
You just said
I said hate speech is free speech. There are areas of the free speech debate which I am not educated
What
enough
if your
on,
store-
and
what
those
if- what
include
if
like
my-
even
so
current
he's-
rulings.
He's saying that you can't
Well,
say
hold on.
whatever
So,
you
Luke,
want.
if you own a bar and you put a sign that says "No blacks," that hate speech is okay.
Well,
Is that
well
what
that's
you're
not
saying?
speech. That's a sign.
I mean,
That's your
signs
free
can
speech, isn't it?
signs can be
asshole?
considered speech to
Are
one
they?
degree. So let me just
I don't know how that works.
let me just work
legislatively.
through your question before I give an answer because I'm not sure about my answer. Now, my first instinct is that person's a fucking asshole, right? My second instinct is, let's say, the more libertarian argument. By the way, this method of like what I'm doing right now is what I hear from like really smart people that I really, really like dig, which is when asked a question, they say, well, one might say X, but another might say Y, and yet another might say Z. And they kind of work through it.
Play through the different
Play through the
perspectives.
difference. And so let me just be clear, like, that is an awful thing to do. The question of whether one should be allowed to do it is a different question than the value of whether it's good or bad morally to do it. And the reason is that when you set a law of any kind that places a government, and that government is placing restrictions on the people, it's worth a conversation to decide, is it worth drawing a line there? And Joe, we talked yesterday about the fact that all of this political stuff, like a lot of it at least, zooms out to where do you draw a line? Whether you're talking about guns, whether you're talking about what Johnny just mentioned, like where does free speech become like hate speech, and where does it become unacceptable, right?
Well,
and where is that line? That's a conversation, and it should always be changing. And always
there is always a line, though.
Well, I think for almost everything there is a line, right? I can't think off the top of my head of something where there isn't a line. And the free speech one, it's like,
that's fair.
As a concept, it makes sense that anyone should be allowed to say anything. But the classic example of like yelling fire in a crowded theater is that, and I think the zoomed out example is, we want as much freedom as possible, but we all agree that you can't have unlimited freedoms, right? Because at some point your individual freedom will conflict with other people's individual freedom. So we have to draw lines so that the bubble of your individual freedom doesn't conflict with other people's bubbles of individual freedom.
We generally agree that don't limit my rights unless they would limit someone else's.
Correct. I think that's my zoomed out principle. Now, how to take that principle and distill it down to real life is really difficult. And so, Johnny, you gave a concrete example, right, of like whether putting a sign up would be good or bad, whatever, something like that. That is at the bottom, right? And my principle is at the top. And how do I connect those dots is really tricky, and I don't know the answer to that. But it's a conversation that I need to have with other smart people to work out.
You definitely can't have a sign that says no blacks.
Right?
Yeah. No, I'm drawing the line there.
Well,
that's where I would draw a line.
what I would say,
you actually can't. That's illegal.
No, and I think it should. Like I'm saying, like as a moral person, like in a society of other people I want to live, like I'm willing to draw. I'm just saying, me personally.
What if somebody put? I'm. By the way, I'm agreeing with you.
The libertarian mindset is they would go out of business because they're a racist.
Right. That's
no. But like historically, that's not true. They don't go out of business. That's the problem, because people.
That is the problem.
People are crazy, racist fucking animals.
Too many people are.
Too many people.
The question would be, it depends where. If you open that in New York City, it would go out of business. If you open that in like certain cities, I won't even like pick out any.
No, but there are situations.
There are places where that would be a problem, right?
Yeah.
And it might not go out of business.
Yeah.
Although it would get national attention to the point where it might.
Well, it would probably be mitigated more now than it would 50, 100 years ago, sure. Because of like media pressure and that.
And so like I'm happy to have that conversation, right? Like I like to think of myself personally as just kind of like floating. Like I'm not all that grounded because I've never been all that interested in politics because it just annoys me. That's why I love science so much, because it's like I can feel more grounded there, and I just hate the wishy-washiness of politics. But I agree with you. Like my instinct is, because I can't trace from my first principle of like people should be able to freely express themselves down to like putting that sign up.
Yeah.
My instinct is to say, let's not allow it for now, because I haven't heard a good argument for it, right? And it's too risky to say that like us as a society would agree with those kinds of things.
Would agree with like, oh, those people aren't comfortable with those people, like that's their right.
Fair enough. But now let me ask you, can you put up a sign that says no Republicans? No Democrats? Can you put up a sign that says no Nazis, right? It's like, so the problem with lines is somebody else can come right back at you and say, let me move your line slightly further in this direction.
Well, wait a minute, Nazi is an affiliation. I choose to be a Nazi. Like, I don't choose to be black or white. That's a difference.
Right, but those categories are also like very vague. Like, what do you mean by that?
what do I mean by that?
The
like
color
I can,
of your skin, the way your parents are,
I
the
can
way
be-
you're raised.
Yeah,
is
I can be born black or white. I can't be necessarily if I'm.
But
born,
you can't be born one or the other. You can be lots of
No,
very.
of course. But I'm saying like in
Ultimately, that sign would imply that it's up to the judgment of the owner, who would be like, "Hey, read the sign. Like, you're not allowed, right?"
you're losing me because like
No, in other words, what I'm saying is like, is just categories of any kind get so
here's
lost.
another
in,
version, right? This is what we've decided. You can't do it based on no blacks. But I live in the South, and a common thing you see on storefronts is no baggy pants, no hoodies, no like scarves, no this, like shoes, like shirt.
Well,
you know,
Johnny,
all
when I
these
was
rules
visiting
that-
you,
and
I
it's
also
really
saw no
targeting certain
handguns. That was a very
groups.
common sign outside places.
Well, that's because you have to legally post it. Otherwise, if someone gets in a fight and they use their handgun and their license, they can be like, "What? They didn't say I didn't have to. Couldn't bring it."
right.
So I think places have to post that.
Yeah, and obviously that's different too. But so the libertarian.
that's a different type of affiliation.
That's a whole different conversation.
Yeah, that's a whole
Let's
different
not even get
conversation,
into
yeah.
guns and
But
stuff.
it ties
this
in.
one.
So Johnny, what you gave was an extreme example of like putting.
But there's places that say no baggy pants. You can't get in if you have baggy pants. If your pants are. But who decides that? Someone can just look at you and your jeans that fit you and go, "Those look baggy. Get the fuck out." So like, it's a weird workaround.
And obviously, like any regulation put in place, you also have the problem of enforcement. I don't know. Let's talk about guns for a second. So for
Let's
fuck
talk
kind of
about
segue is
guns.
that?
How many do you
Let's
think
talk about guns
every
for
white
1
male
second.
should have?
well, I just meant
After all
like
your
in the
right-wing
conversation
views
of where
you've
to draw
explained.
lines. You were talking about this yesterday, Joe.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so let me just frame. One of the things I hate about politics is that everything.
I'm sorry, can I just mention this beer I'm drinking?
Oh yeah,
real
what
quick?
is it?
We
It's a
haven't announced the
Baltic
beer
Porter
yet.
with hickory bark in it. It's fucking amazing. I'm losing my mind drinking it.
He's wasted.
Is that a crowler?
Oh, man.
Or are you just close
No,
to the
it's
camera?
a can. Fonta Flora, an
tiny
amazing
hands.
brewery in North
Oh,
Carolina.
you just have tiny
Just
hands,
started
Johnny.
getting-
I thought it was a crowler. Johnny, why are your hands so tiny?
You know he's drunk. 'cause
It's called Wolf Spit. It's a 16-ounce can.
He's not talking to them.
Yeah, well, it's weird. It looks so big in your hands.
I told you, I've been losing weight. Been working
You
hard.
do look thinner. You look good.
I'm losing it mostly in my metacarpals.
Yeah, that's what's happening.
You're doing a lot of
That's what
hand
I've been-
workouts. I know.
Oh yeah, you know how that is. But this beer is brewed with hickory bark with Half Acre in Chicago and Fonta Flora.
Oh, beautiful.
And it really does taste like a dark roasted tree. I don't know how else to explain it.
Hey, Johnny, did you
So go on about your
Did
political.
Yeah, you know, you were saying what I was saying.
did you hear the what was it? Douglas Murray when he was on Joe Rogan's podcast recently.
I don't know.
I've heard him on a few podcasts. This guy Douglas Murray. But here's a quote of his that just kind of stuck with me as I tried to sift through all the chaos of the internet. Quote,
All of it?
the idea that
Yeah, you got to.
everything
It's
is a
rough.
left-right issue is one that, for a lot of people, feels not only unnecessarily divisive, but ignorant of the actual dividing lines which exist in our societies. Increasingly, the real divide is not between people who believe one thing about a subject and people who believe another, but about whether you are the sort of person who even wants to allow a full and frank discussion to go on in the first place. So it's
That
like,
ties into everything
one,
you've been saying,
not
yeah.
every issue that exists in society can you just divide as like, boom, left, right? Two, are you the kind of person that realizes that it is conversation between different people that, one, not only prevents violence because you're allowing conversation, but it also allows for the best solutions to come to fruition, right? Because me as an individual, I might have my opinions, but I'm fucking dumb on a lot of fronts. So let's say me,
Well, you have to be. You can't possibly know everything.
can't know
And if
everything.
you think you do, that's a problem.
and your knowledge and your version of reality and everything that's in your head is filled with holes. In this little blog thing I tried to type up, I called them placeholders. I tried to draw back all the way to, like, we all build models of reality, and those are built on information that we gather through various sources. But we have these mental placeholders of things that we have to admit we haven't gone into, right? Because you can't go fully in, you can't trace your knowledge fully backwards into every little thing you know, right? So a lot of those things, I call them like little flags. Like I place a flag there and I say, I'm going to form an opinion based on this flag, but this flag that I've placed down, I know might be false. So I have to I set that aside and I say, I have to look further into that. And this opinion I'm starting to form, I have to be extra ready to let it go and decide I was wrong about it because it's hinging on something I didn't have time to go into. That could be an article that I read that I think, I smelled a little bias. I better look up the facts that they said to make sure they're true, right? Like if you're on the left and you're reading about Jordan Peterson, you might read something that says, oh, he is an alt-right, speaker box or whatever, and he said XYZ.
The problem of echo chambers too.
Because you know how many people post articles on Facebook or retweet them or whatever without even reading them?
Do you know what's scary about that is more and more recently I keep seeing articles posted on Facebook and they're so clearly make-believe at this point that I see them and I comment on them now. I'm like, I'm pretty sure this is made up, and people are like, what? And then they take them down because it's like, yeah, that was just made up.
Right.
Like that wasn't true at all.
But you're saying you clicked on it and read it and then you were like, oh, yeah. Because I think a lot of people that post those, what happens is...
Well, it's a shock value thing. It's like, oh my God, but it's because of this...
See, I don't go on Facebook, so I don't know what all this fake news is. I've used Reuters and AMP.
Well, so Johnny, you've always had...
Since middle school.
You've always had your I
when
noticed...
he was a boy...
Well, you've always had
Reuters was king.
With people that do use Facebook and things like
He's
that...
Johnny Reams.
I feel like Johnny has always had a slightly more libertarian / just independent opinion of certain things, including guns, and
I don't even own guns, but I end up on the pro gun side.
I almost like it because for the people that are mostly getting their news from something like Facebook, there's a few things going on. One, they're emotionally getting charged up by what they see, right? And there's this concept of righteousness, which is embedded in this, which is one, I hate the idea that kids died in a school shooting. That gets me not only sad, but angry, right? Two, I like a brain in general likes the idea of being right, of feeling righteous, right? And three, I learned, let's say, 5 facts about gun statistics or whatever. And you combine those and now somebody thinks and feels like they're ready for a full-on debate about guns until they encounter someone an intellectual, someone like a Jordan Peterson, or there's a I guess libertarian right-leaning guy named Ben Shapiro. And when he encounters people, there's a famous Ben Shapiro Piers Morgan conflict on Piers Morgan thing. It's on YouTube, yeah, where Ben Shapiro just calls out Piers Morgan for one, not knowing anything about guns and just demonizing people like him. I wonder that might be worth finding. I'm gonna just type it.
Cue it on the cue.
Cue it up,
as Piers Morgan would say.
Johnny, Joe, I know you guys might have a slightly different opinion on guns, and Joe, I kind of like where you're coming from, but I also know where Johnny's coming from. He's lived in the South a little bit more,
he also is
and
holding
I think
a sword.
He also may or may not have just displayed his sword for us.
One of his weapons.
One of my swords.
I should say.
Is that an arm, etc.? That kind of idea.
Right. I mean, I literally have a bow in the corner of the room with arrows, so I'm all about fun things that can, be used dangerously, but.
Well, there's the one argument for big guns, which is they're just fun, which is a hard argument to make.
Well, here's
the counter argument of safety.
Here's the thing: it comes
but
down to
the other
line,
argument
right?
of self-defense guns. What were you going to say? Sir?
It comes back down to again. This all comes back down to lines.
But and to admit that it's complicated about where to draw a line.
Of course it is.
And you should be suspicious.
Joe, your mic sucks.
What'd I do? Did I get D-mic?
I can barely hear you. But go ahead, Lou.
Testing. One Joe.
You're just really quiet compared to Luke.
I think the soundboard's on the fritz a little bit.
Luke is pointing with his finger as well, So he might just be more emphatic.
I'm keeping an eye mostly on the master audio to make sure what gets recorded is fine.
Why
Johnny,
do you have to point with that?
But I'm not.
Oh, okay, it just sounds like it's recording through your mic. But
Yeah,
it's
I'm
fine
not
then
sure
if
what's
it's
going on.
coming
Things
through.
are cutting in and out.
Yeah, this might be a hack.
It's getting weird, man.
It's getting weird. I think there's like a solar storm passing through this
No,
room.
Mercury's in retrograde.
Yeah, I've had some technology weird stuff.
Mercury
happening to
really
me
is
today.
in retrograde. whatever
So
the
we're
fuck
kind
that
of
means.
worried. It's
Yeah.
I don't know. Pick up a conspiracy. It's one of that. It's that
What?
one.
Wait. What? This would be a
the lizard
conspiracy if, like,
people.
we did an
Let's
episode
say
where
it's
we
the
kind
lizard
of
people.
criticized the left about politics, and then I go back and listen to it, and it's all just like garbled, like electrons, like that would be freaky. That would freak me out. I would think that like people aren't happy with what we're doing.
Bernie
I would
Sanders
be
is
leaning
keeping
more
you
towards
down.
flat Earth at that point.
Yeah.
Like
hacked us.
99.9998% sure that the world's round. Or
So,
something like that.
I'm just gonna. I got this clip. This is a clip about
Do it
the
live.
gun debate on Piers Morgan.
From Vice President Biden, who heads the White House Task Force on Guns. My next guest has strong words for me. He says, I'm off the rails on guns in America. Ben Shapiro is editor-at-large at Breitbart.com and the author of Bullies, How the Left...
Side note: he used to be editor at Breitbart, and then he very much had like a vehement disagreement with Steve Bannon, and he's no longer with Breitbart. He says some controversial things that I 100% don't agree with. This guy Ben Shapiro, but he also equally gets demonized and called Nazi and fascist. He gets called a Nazi, and he's like a
Yeah, I
pretty-
disagree with him on more things, way more things than I agree
Yeah.
with. But I still don't think he's a Nazi.
Also,
or
he's
like
a
piece of shit
fundamentalist,
or-
like Jewish person. Like he always has a yarmulke on. What's the word?
I don't think he's a fundamentalist.
No, not
he's a
fundamentalist.
conservative
I meant
Jew.
there's
He's not Orthodox.
Orthodox
I don't think.
Jewish, I think.
No, I don't think he's Orthodox. I think he's
Well-
conservative.
yeah. Well,
There's like
I don't know the
Reform,
gradations.
I don't know the
conservative, and then
gradations
there's
either.
like Orthodox. There's a
but the
whole,
point is, he's very
maybe
Jewish
he is.
and very
I don't actually
open
know.
and proud about his faith and
I
like
shouldn't say.
and belief in his religion. And
Do it live.
Even the left calls him a Nazi, and so I just think like at least let's hear people out fairly, right? So just anyways.
Disagree with them.
If
point
you've
by
heard that
point
name and that's
instead
like a tag, like just
Yeah.
consider, softening up the
Do it
oh my
live.
god he's evil kind of thing.
Fear and intimidation silences Americans. So why am I off the rails, Mr. Shapiro?
Honestly, Piers, you've kind of been a bully on this issue because what you do, and I've seen it repeatedly on your show, I watch your show, and I've seen it repeatedly, what you tend to do is you tend to demonize people who differ from you politically by standing on the graves of the children of Sandy Hook, saying they don't seem to care enough about the dead kids. If they cared more about the dead kids, they would agree with you on policy. I think we can have a rational political conversation about balancing rights and risks and rewards of all of these different policies, but I don't think that what we need to do is demonize people on the other side as being unfeeling about what happened in
How
Sandy
dare
Hook.
you accuse me of standing on the graves of the children that died there? How dare you?
I've seen you do it repeatedly, Piers.
Like I say, how dare you?
Well, I mean, you can keep saying that, but you've done it repeatedly. What you do, and I've seen you do it on the program, is you keep
It's like,
saying
well,
to
that's not
folks
really a
that if they
counterpoint.
disagree with you
Now you're
politically,
standing on
then
your
somehow this is a
reputation
violation
grave and saying, how
of
dare
what
you
happened in Sandy
disparage
Hook.
my
And
reputation. I just did. What do you mean? How dare I? Yes.
But I mean,
also
and
that.
it is true. It's like pick your sort of news person on the left, and I'm not saying everybody does this, but you can. There's no shortage of examples. We talked earlier about the suffering in the world. Is just because you can point to suffering, you can't then structure the conversation to say because suffering X exists, then policy Y has to be agreed with. Otherwise, you're okay with suffering X.
Luke, is this
So
you announcing
I'll break
your run
down
for Congress?
I'll break down the whole
2018.
gun
I'm happy
problem
to
for
run
you.
for
Luke,
Congress.
ladies and gentlemen, Luke is now
Is this it?
running as
Is this
the
when it's
first
happening?
ever Thunk Party candidate for the 2018 midterm elections.
If that's what this podcast turns into, the Thunk Party, like, fuck, man.
Thunk party.
Luke is our candidate.
I tell you what, if you listeners set it up and like I just have to like show up, I'm in.
Listeners, our one listener from fucking Sweden is like, how the fuck does that
We
translate?
have more listeners from Korea than the U.S. probably.
No, we have one listener from South Korea.
Okay, yeah.
Place is
Thank
great.
you. How do you say?
We
thank
do have
you
a
in
pretty good
Korean?
representation, like internationally. Like we have like a download from at least 15 countries that aren't the U.S.
Unless there's just bots in every country.
They're all
'cause every
Russian
country
I don't
has
know.
bots.
It could be
internet
bots. I don't know
at
how
this
that
point.
works. Yeah.
I don't think we.
It's probably just all
We're
bots.
still
Whatever,
missing
I'm having
Africa
fun.
though.
Maybe even here it's all bots. I don't know.
So I want to just break down the gun problem real.
Yeah, go for it.
I think I understand it because I
He's
heard
got it.
the big the legitimate points from both sides, and you're right. Neither side listened to the other one's points. So the side of the super anti-gun people is like safety, pure safety. Like if we can just get rid of all the guns, there won't ever be another mass shooting, which is technically true. But a lot of people think isn't logistically
Sure, yeah.
possible because there's like a billion fucking guns in the country.
Right.
Right.
Like literally a billion of them. So it's how are you going to get rid of
Yeah.
them? Whatever. But that's that argument. And then the super other side is security. I want a gun because I don't trust it's not that I don't trust the police, but I don't trust them to be there when I need them. If someone's breaking into my house in the middle of the night, I can't wait 16 minutes for their car to get here.
Yeah.
I'll be dead and my family will be raped and murdered by then. Like if I have a gun, it's about that. I'm not willing to give up my own security to the state, even if you are. And you trying to take my gun away is you making me entrust my self protection to the state. Whereas just because you've given up that right doesn't give you the right to give up my right to it. Like I've heard, intelligent gun owners
Right.
explain this to me. It's like, yeah, that's a really good intellectual argument, like legally and
Right,
just
right,
logically. But then the other side is just the pure safety argument of, well, if we get rid of all of them, it'll be safer. So those are the two legitimate points, but neither see each other or agree with it. So people just shout past each other like you were saying.
Right. And
That's
then,
funny because I teach that too. Because I'll have students for their research papers try to write about like gun debate, and a lot of times they want to argue one or the other. Like I have students who have come to me and said, they present their paper, and I say, well, so what you're trying to argue?
So what you're saying is
No, literally. So what you're saying, no, and I say, like, if that's not what you're saying, tell me. Like, so what you're saying is that we should ban all guns, and they're like, yes. Or what you're saying is,
you use it as a teacher as like a tool to
totally,
yeah.
because if that's what because I want to know is like, is that actually what you're saying?
Sure.
And if it's not, then great. Like,
Because
what are you actually
because
saying?
if
But
that's what their
sometimes
writing
it
is leading you. If that writing is what they're leading you to believe, then they should be aware.
Well, they
of
should
it,
clarify that,
whether it's intentional.
And
or not.
when they
Yeah.
when they say it, like I've had students say, like, yeah, I believe that all guns should be banned. No private citizen should be allowed to own guns, and this is my argument.
Yeah.
And my counter to that is, great. It's great that you think that. That's your right to think that.
Why?
You're entitled to think that. Absolutely. Of
course.
Having said that, you're not going to convince as many people as if you take a slightly different approach. And like, is that going to be more
Right.
effective in what you're actually trying to accomplish? In
Which
terms
is
of
the question-
reducing violence or whatever.
Well, that's the practical
Yeah,
approach.
right.
And
yeah.
it gets back to the question I always like to ask people, which is, what
But
is
that's
your
a
end game?
utilitarian
Yeah.
approach. Luke's not okay with ideology, so you can't use
Well,
that, Joe.
so Johnny,
Sorry,
speaking
Dave.
of utilitarianism,
No, I'm sorry. Continue.
like broadly in
But you get it,
philosophy,
yeah.
like when I was talking about this, like sort of like friendship gone awry largely due to politics, I realized
It's
like
pronounced gonorrhea.
behind
I'm such a child, but I really.
I've been
hate
trying
wait,
to
what
do-
about gonorrhea?
I've been
That went
trying to
over
do-
my
I've
head.
been trying to do the real life Johnny trolling thing where people say things and you're just like, actually, it's
What
pronounced.
did you say, Luke? What was the word he
I
corrected?
get it.
Because he said like, oh,
No,
when it's
what did you
gonorrhea,
say?
and I'm like, it's pronounced
Is it
gonorrhea.
what?
Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be close. It just has to have like a letter in common.
Yeah, like a letter and a
But
vowel.
it was really close. It was
So
really
I said
good. What did you
gonorrhea, and Joe said you
Yeah.
mean gonorrhea.
It's
Yeah.
pronounced
say?
gonorrhea.
Yeah, that was really good. That's a really good.
That's a good one, yeah.
I'm glad I made you proud.
It was
Johnny.
so good that it went over my head. Just like the gonorrhea.
Yeah, I caught it.
Thank
Oh.
God.
No, that doesn't go
It-
over.
it-
you
it-
got to
it
you
was-
got to
it
treat
shot
that.
right over my
You still
head.
gotta
Which
treat
is
Gonorrhea.
ideal.
No, no.
The cum
Unfortunately,
shot
it
right
doesn't-
over my head.
No,
Oh no,
No, you've been
we might have
exposed,
just dipped
Luke.
the toe into drunk tank.
that's not how it works. You
I
should see a
just dipped
doctor.
my finger into the drunk tank to see what
Dipped
the
your
temperature
gonorrhea
was.
soaked
Yeah.
finger into.
Oh, no, you're in.
I dipped my
You're
I
in.
dipped
Oh,
my
you're-
I
you're
dipped my
dick deep
finger
and you
into
got
the
no
gonorrhea
You're in.
infested drunk tank. You know what? I'm kind of happy because I wanted to make sure the political episode had a little balance to it, and it turns out add 3 beers, and it does.
Look, I think the moral of the story is
Oh, this is good. Go on.
it's pronounced.
Yeah, we
this
need a
is
moral.
good.
2 hours in. We need a fucking.
Yeah, give us
moral.
The
give us
moral
a theme.
is-
Give us a moral, Joe.
I'm gonna go full
Rambling,
South Park
useless-
on y'all. All right. No, so seriously though, like I think it comes back to what we originally said, which is that life is hard, and everybody in their own way is really struggling through, and some people are more aware of that than
And
others,
some
I
people
think.
have to, unfortunately, struggle more than others.
Absolutely.
And to the extent that we can fix those problems without causing more problems, we should try to do that.
Well, and this
but
comes-
how to do that
this
is a
comes-
conversation that
and
needs to be
this comes
had.
back to the idea of like negotiating realities. It's
Yeah.
like not everybody's like you can argue about objective truth and like what's best for the whole, but people are going to disagree, and there's a difference. What it comes down to is the fundamental difference between the people who are willing to have a conversation and the people who just want to win.
I think that is a
on either
fundamental
side,
difference.
right?
Yeah. I would, I said earlier, hate speech is free speech, and I say that because I 98% believe it, let's say, and I'm open to the exceptions, and I will, whatever. What you just said,
Yeah.
though, I 100% believe, to, let's say, because of what I criticized Johnny before, I 99.99999% believe that if you look at me in the eyes and I ask you the question, what evidence could I present to you that would change your mind, and you say nothing,
Yeah.
I will say, I am moving on with my day. Good day, sir.
Good day. Yeah. You get nothing.
You get nothing.
Cutting your losses.
It's
That's
it's a
phrase.
waste of time to interact with
Yeah,
you,
totally.
and I will actually leave you behind and go talk to somebody else who might actually be able to have a conversation and work out how to move forward, right?
Right.
So one of the things about this whole left-right thing is that there are different personality types. There are different interpretations of reality, and it is possible to bridge the gap between those differences, and the only way to do that is through conversation and through healthy conversation. I wrote this whole thing out about good faith conversation.
Are you going to link this?
Yeah, I'll link it. Yeah.
The Luke Treatsy?
It's like
That's
the Luke
that's
like
his first
burped out
campaign
his
speech.
thoughts on a plane thing.
That's his 2018.
My first campaign speech.
You only got like 6 months, dude.
This is it. Yeah, this is
So-
your,
This is his big announcement.
primary.
So good
speech.
faith conversation
Your primary stump
versus
speech.
bad faith conversation.
Yeah.
Good faith conversation includes all the things, like we've hit a lot of them, right? But it's like, hey, I'm talking to you, right? I can learn something from you. If I assume that, I'm going to listen, right?
Yeah.
2, if I'm to disagree with you, I can't do that unless I understand your point of view, right?
The fuck is that dog?
That's a dog. Yeah.
there's just
The
a
dog
dog,
snuck in here.
Pass the fuck out. Like, yeah, I get this.
Another thing
at the
about
name of this beer,
a
by
good
the way.
faith conversation is you have to actually project, not just be able to edit yourself, but you have to project to the other person that you're willing to edit yourself, right? Now, what are the marks of a bad faith conversation, Joe? I'm like running out of like mental sentence formation skills, so that's why I asked you the question genuinely.
How much beer do we have left?
Yeah, I think we're at least ankle deep.
You already talked about sticking your fingers in gonorrhea like fluid. So
If not, we might be approaching the navel, which is like the plunge.
yeah,
You know, that's what you're doing,
I
basically,
said
once you pass the navel.
yeah, I said my piece. I feel like
No, like in all seriousness though, like on this,
No, it's like not agreeing on first principles or not accepting evidence.
he wants to go into
That's
drunk
bad
tank, is what he's
faith.
trying to
right?
say.
Arguing.
yeah, I mean, like at the end of the day, I would say if
I'm trying.
if I had if somebody gave me 5 minutes or 3
Drinking
minutes
wolf
or
spit.
1 minute, whatever,
Wolf
like
spit.
if somebody gave me a short amount of time to just say what I think would most importantly fix what I think is wrong with like political discourse right now, I would say it's recognizing the difference between bad faith and good faith conversations.
Yes, I think that's
Now
what it
that
boils
idea,
down to,
I
yeah.
didn't. It's not original
Yeah.
to me. Like I first heard it with Brett Weinstein and his wife Heather Heying, I think is her name. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, but they really have figured out like because they had to deal with a lot of shit with the Evergreen State College thing. I don't think we're going to get time to go into that in this episode, so we'll link it, and I encourage you to look it up if you don't know. If you do, then you know some of the craziness that happened. Basically, a bunch of SJWs took over a college campus. The police were told to stand down. They told this professor, don't come to campus. We can't guarantee your safety, right? It was like a pretty intense thing. The president like read a message basically being held hostage in his office. None of this made the mainstream media because it was not, let's say it's not popular to have, to report on African American students being racist. In any case,
There you go. You're committed, Luke.
well, I mean, just look up the Evergreen
You said
State
it.
College controversy, and you can catch yourself up. But
You're gonna piss off any like Hispanic or Latino people that were involved because you just called them all African American.
well, it was primarily like an event that was about African American students. That's maybe you could call it more loosely people of color or something. But the point being is,
No, people of color covers, I think, all the oppressed minorities.
sure. I mean, I'm happy to call it
America.
whatever. The main point I'm making is that Brett Weinstein, in his general approach to trying to deal with these students, he said, I don't want to debate you. I want to have a dialogue with you, right? And the difference between debate and dialectic, right? Like a debate frames it as I win, you lose, or vice versa, right? And a dialogue implies that we're both agreeing that although we might have strong opinions, we're heavily ignorant on a lot of what built those opinions, and let me listen to you and gain what I can. You'll listen to me and gain what you can, and then we'll let parts of ourselves burn off, and then together we will build a better version of each of our opinions. That's how it would work in a perfect world. I understand that's difficult with all the emotional like baggage that comes along with any heavy topic, but if you don't have that as your goal, then you're definitely lost. You have to at least have that as your goal and then try to move forward from there.
I see. So what you're saying? No, I'm just kidding.
What am I saying, Johnny?
I'm not sure, man. We've really gone pretty deep this episode. We definitely have to like alert people that this isn't one of our fun ones. It's not that it's not interesting, or that
we
it's
could trick them
boring.
into
It's just
listening this
not-
far by saying that once we hit the right blood alcohol content, like it got slightly fun.
Well, we'll have to re-listen.
That's true.
And double check on
I should do that more.
But yeah, one of us should.
One of
We'll
us
take
should at
turns.
least listen to it once.
Yeah, I'm down with taking turns to do that. But
No, I mean, fair enough. Like, I
but,
feel like
I don't
want to
even
get
have
this.
I don't have a would you rather. I couldn't think of one that wasn't just like racist or sexist or just shitty in some way. You know what I mean? That wasn't just a version of that. Yeah. Would you rather be like a woman in the 1600s or like a black man? Like, you know, they're all. It's all.
Oh,
fucked
I mean,
up
it didn't have to
choices
be
in, like, a
on
weird
theme
way.
necessarily.
Oh, I didn't even look up.
Well,
like,
I
a
tried to,
fact
and
or
I
fiction.
psyched myself out. So I was like,
I mean, it's fine.
like
It's
wanna-
also just good to talk like now and then. You know, it's all good.
Yeah. So for just as like in closing, for anybody who has who's still listening and
Just look at the dog,
who had
and you'll see
no
the truth.
idea about anything regarding this phenomenon of social justice warrior thing, I just encourage you to approach it with an open mind. Like I said it in the beginning, I think, right? Like I'm generally on the left of politics, and I would like to see policies that are generally on the left of politics succeed. I would not like to see Donald Trump or anything like that succeed. And I do think that if the left continues to sort of radicalize and just become more cult-like and just kick out its own members, that the people in the center that would be convinced to go left will only be pushed to the right. And we're definitely already seeing that happen.
I think it's even more than that. Like, if you look at Trump as an example, the reason why Trump got elected, I think, to your point of polarization, is not so much even that it pushes people to those outer limits, but that it disengages people, which is something else that we've been talking
Makes
about.
them not care at all.
Well, and that's what happened. That's why, you know, Hillary Clinton lost, because people weren't interested. They didn't like what she had to say.
Yeah.
For, you know, all sorts of reasons. And the people who went out and voted for Obama...
Well, she was very disingenuous.
Well, the people who went out and voted for Obama because they were excited didn't show up to vote for Hillary.
Yep, that was a big part of
They
it.
just
Yeah.
didn't show up. Millennials did not show up in the 2016 election.
One thing I noticed about
Statistically,
Hillary-
they didn't go. They didn't vote.
One
Or
thing
they
about-
voted for Gary Johnson or Jill Stein or some
Oh, God.
fuckface. You know,
Aleppo?
Like,
What's Aleppo?
what's Aleppo? The planet is going to melt in 5 billion years anyway, so I don't see why we should ruin our economy now to save global warming.
Yeah, I mean, so
Fuck that guy.
isn't it sad
Fuck
that
Gary Johnson.
isn't it sad
I'm saying that on the record.
in 2016 the two choices for leader of the United States of America were two awful candidates? Now, don't get me wrong. I think if you voted for Trump instead of Hillary, that was a mistake. I understand why you might have done that, but I think it was a mistake.
Okay,
I think it's less a
George
mistake
Carlin.
than not voting
George
for
Carlin
anyone.
made this joke 40 years ago when he said, America, like, it's supposed to be a democracy, but it's really bullshit. You get 31 flavors of ice cream, but you only get 2 choices for the person in charge of
Right.
everything. Like, how is that a democracy?
Yeah.
How's that fair choice and whatnot?
Yeah,
You know?
and it's mysterious that not only do we only get 2 choices, but that they can both suck, right?
Yeah, you're pinned down
and-
in
You
like
got to pick
and-
between the turd and the douche sandwich.
Yeah, right.
Or the
Yeah,
douche
South
and the
Park
turd
nailed it.
sandwich, whatever it was.
So my gripe with
we'll link it.
with Hillary voters who can't even understand why someone would vote for Trump, I think you're not empathizing enough.
I voted for Hillary. I wasn't thrilled to vote for her,
I reluctantly did it.
but yeah, I was like, here
She's
are
a very corrupt career
well,
politician.
you know what? Here are my options. I know the clear choice that gets me to where I want to go.
I'll tell you exactly why I couldn't vote for Trump and I had to vote for Hillary. One, I wanted my
There's
vote
a
to
lot
Do you
of
think
Yeah.
if she was president right now, they would be talking about her Twitter on a daily basis?
I don't think so. No. Also,
Are you sure?
I think
you don't think that she'd be tweeting like personal attacks to professional people
nice, Jeff.
at random
anything.
hours during the day?
Look, I don't know.
on
I,
her golden fucking toilet.
I can't project
On a
exactly.
golden
Big
throne.
Macs. Dude, this is such
that
a
you
fucking
could shit
insane
in,
situation.
crushing Big Macs and fucking porn stars.
I can't really project what would have been happening,
God.
but I don't think any of those things. But at the same,
But you can't be certain. You're only 99.9998%.
You gotta kind of respect what a piece of shit Trump is. you
well,
know?
again,
Like,
I come back
he
to
just doesn't
No,
give
but
a
that's
fuck.
that's
like-
why that was his appeal. He didn't give a fuck.
Right.
No, there's something
And- but
totally
you know,
to that.
that's why. Yeah. Yes.
That-
yes. Yes.
No, that's
Yeah,
the
it's
appeal.
so
he didn't give
crazy,
a fuck.
but
Did
there's
you
something
see,
to
Did
it.
you see his special election speech in Southwest Pennsylvania like last week?
No.
It's insane.
I heard he had a big rally.
It's insane.
Yeah, but Joe-
he like fake walks off stage a few times like this. I'm
came
acting like
back
a stone
out.
man right now, and he goes, "Oh, I'm not being very presidential," and then he just starts saying some other crazy shit, and you're like, "This
Yeah.
dude does have syphilis.
But Joe,
His mind is
at
melting."
the same time,
like, what the
Yeah.
fuck?
at the same time, it's like, well,
Maybe.
he's in being that energy. Like I know more data about him than I did about Hillary.
Oh, totally.
You know, like, I
then-
can see more of
It's
him.
not even about, but it goes beyond Hillary because it's like, look at the Republican primary.
They're all robots of themselves.
Well, that's the thing. It's like all these people, like, I still feel like I've been fucked. Like, jobs are like all the Republican rhetoric, like jobs, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
Like that,
Gerbs.
I'm not happy with that. This guy is different from all those people who have failed me and who are similar to the people who have
is.
failed me.
He is.
Yeah.
He's totally different from that, and
At
that
least
was his appeal.
different. At least
well, that was
different,
his like,
yeah.
dude.
He's
Hillary,
definitely
I don't know
different.
the numbers, but Hillary like wildly outspended Trump
Of course.
in the election, like wildly so, and he still, you know, he got
And it's
done in
nuts.
right
The money
places.
Trump spent is like money he raised from people. Like people that made or like below the poverty line sent him money, and he's a fucking billionaire.
Also, the fucking
like, isn't that crazy to think about?
what's that fucking company? Did you read that article about that British
America.
consulting firm that did the whole like
Cambridge
what,
Analytica.
what in the
yeah.
fuck? That is some conspiracy.
Yeah, it's still early in the story.
That
for
makes me
that.
think of House
You know,
of Cards
more
in
stuff's
reality.
gonna
That is
come
some
out.
conspiracy shit right there.
Ah.
That is like
So,
that's a whole other thing. Dude.
Actually, I think our sort of energy
Fuck.
now is a good energy of conveying just how daunting it is to just consider politics. And look, I guess here's my message, if I could say it in a short sentence.
Figure shit out for what it's actually worth. I think that's my.
That's pretty good.
That's my thesis. I'm out. I'm turning off my mic. No,
well, don't do that. It'll make a loud click.
Okay, I'm proverbially
Just
turning
hang
off
out.
my mic.
Just
Wait,
relax. Just cool your jets.
That's the mic going off.
I think my going
cool
off
your jets
sentence
for a
would be the degree of certainty you should have on any opinion should be balanced with the amount of objective truth and fact that you have balancing that.
You are fake news.
And sometimes you just can't get enough fact, and sometimes it's hard to find facts, and so you have to leave things in your mind. This is supposed to be one sentence.
Yeah, dude, what the fuck, man?
I wasn't gonna.
Okay.
say
Never
it,
gonna
but
make it in
Yeah.
20
I'm working out my
You're
thoughts.
at,
Ready?
like,
Here it is.
2.5.
Here it is.
Yeah.
One
Be
sentence.
willing to leave things as uncertain in your mind. Leave things uncertain in your mind. And it's okay.
That was still 2
it's okay.
sentences. You're on the
okay,
third
ready?
sentence.
Here's my sentence. I've got it now.
Well, Luke, can I help?
It's okay to not know.
Okay.
Okay.
There it is.
That's
Luke,
actually
Luke, 2018.
Mine
running
was
for
more
Congress.
complicated. Than
Luke
that.
Keurig,
That was better.
2018. He's running with a fucking coffee machine.
Uh,
Fuck it. Who cares? The president's banging porn stars.
Yeah, why can't
run
I
with
run
a coffee
with
machine?
a running mate of a coffee
A
machine?
coffee
No,
machine
Joe,
that spits
Joe,
out
not just banging,
caffeinated
Joe.
diarrhea.
Joe.
Go ahead, Johnny.
Specifically, raw dogging porn stars half his age. Which is a baller.
This Keurig
move.
is-
Your
has-
name. You're worth $1 billion. You have a kid and a wife, and you're like, I'm just gonna raw dog this porn star because I want to bang her. Like, if I have a kid, she can get half my shit or however.
I'll
the
still
law
have
works.
half
Like,
$1 billion.
That's whether you love or hate Trump. That's a fucking baller move to be like, I'll just roll the dice and hope I don't impregnate her. Like, that's crazy. That's psychotic.
There's something
man.
unhinged
Is that,
about
is
it.
that
yeah.
your one sentence?
Yeah,
Yeah, was that it, Johnny?
that's my one.
Was that your sign off?
Moral about politics.
No. I don't want that to be my legacy.
Let Johnny give a chance to give his sign off.
No.
Because like as
That's a
of
good
now,
one.
me and Joe said something very liberal and very correct, and all you said was enabling that it's okay for Trump to bang.
Yeah, that's not what I want to be remembered for.
He doesn't want to be remembered. That's why.
No. I would much rather, specifically.
He's gonna do it.
Did you say Pacifically?
You find someone,
Like-
specifically, as in the ocean. If you find,
Let's break Johnny.
if you find someone you disagree with, you should wind up and tell them to go.
I told you.
Oh,
I told
fuck.
you. I called it. I
Joe,
totally
sorry.
called it.
Joe had his mouse hovered
I
over
no,
the
I
hang
had
up.
I was leaning over the screen so Johnny couldn't see me with my hand over the hang up button. And I looked at Luke and I mouthed hang up.
You
and
know what? 'Cause I
Luke
really-
was like, he might have something here. Let him do it. And
I
was
really
like,
thought Johnny might
I'm
have
not
something
buying
there.
it.
Fuck.
I wasn't buying
All right,
it.
it's okay. It's okay.
This is on you.
We'll get it. I'll take this one.
Yeah, you got to take this one.
Listeners, if you don't know, we have this hang up game with,
Oh yeah,
with
we should
Johnny.
explain that. Yeah.
As we're approaching like 2 hours to we basically feel the vibe that like the podcast should end.
Yeah. 2.5 hours.
We sort of each like the vibe changes. There's an
Yeah.
energy which is like one of us is about to hang up, and the
Yeah.
game is who gets to hang up first, and you get extra points, not actual points. It's like
Well,
whatever.
you don't want to lose. Like
It's
you,
a
you
better.
don't want to hang up too early, but you also
Well,
if
you don't
wait
wanna
too
kill
long-
the conversation.
It's a game of chicken.
It's
is
a game
what
of
it is.
chicken.
Yeah,
It's a
for
hang up
sure.
chicken.
Hang up chicken.
Hang up
yeah.
chicken.
Oh, that's what we should call it.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
hang up chicken.
And so, how do you win at hang up chicken like extra well? Is
You wait as long
you
as you can.
get their attention genuinely.
Yeah.
And then
Oh,
you
by
hang
the
up.
way, yeah.
Yeah.
We've
And
gotten
so
them
you're
a
like,
couple
by the
times,
way,
yeah.
like the last thing I wanted to say, and like they're genuinely listening. Boom, and you hit him.
That and I will
Well
say
played,
for the
Johnny.
record, no, that
No,
wasn't that
lucky,
well played.
lucky.
Yeah, no, because that was in a very set,
Johnny didn't win. I lost.
Yes, I would agree
Yeah.
with that, and that's not to be like,
I should have let
derisive.
you hang up.
Yeah, you should have let me hang.
Yeah.
But that's fine. That happens.
It's
like
okay.
I fucked up myself,
Yeah.
and I will in the future. Like this is.
And Joe, we can talk about
cycle.
it, and that's what this episode's about. Is
It's
that
about having conversations.
have a healthy conversation, have
Yeah.
a good faith conversation. Listen to people. Consider that they might know something that you don't know. Maybe consider you might be wrong, and consider maybe you're half wrong and they're half wrong, and you can build a better version of reality together with other people.
And Trump raw dogs porn stars.
And look, even with Trump, right? There's a thing in meditation
Oh,
called
boy.
loving kindness meditation.
Oh, boy.
And I've
Did
heard
you
this.
bang Trump in your
No, I've
dreams?
heard this from a lot of people that say, I hate Trump. I hate him. And I ask them, what do you mean by that? Like, do you really hate him? And you know, I've always got confused answers. And I just think if your mind is in the right place, if it's in that meaningful balance between yin and yang, chaos and order, if you're just seeing reality from a place of balance, call it the Force from Star Wars, whatever you want to call it, right? If you're in that balance, you can't really hate anybody. You can only see them as like acting out part of this balance between chaos, order, good, evil, yin, yang, right? And it's like in loving kindness meditation, you basically go from person to person that you know, not know, even yourself, and just say, may you be happy, may you be free from suffering, may you be at peace, may you be truly happy and free. It's just like you repeat these wishes of well-being to people. And when Donald Trump won and I was just like feeling more emotional about like, Jesus, this is insane. Like, I don't know how to process this. I remember that coming up in my mind. I'm like, ha ha ha, Luke, you should wish loving kindness on Donald Trump. And then part of my brain was like, fuck that. And then another part of my brain is like, no, do it. And I did it. And then like eventually I was able to see Donald Trump as like a poor, stupid orange baby that just was saying, I never got loved enough, you know?
So I just grab him by the pussy.
No, before all that, you know?
Yeah,
Like,
but that's what it led to.
Like every adult human, you know, consider if you had their life experience, if you had their everything, like if you had their genetics, if you had all that, you would be that person.
But so does the hate then become something, like it doesn't...
Well, the hate dissolves when you get into that state of mind.
You would say that, like, so when you say dissolve, like, does that also include the opposite, which is what I would consider to be, like, love?
I would say it's like all dualities that they collapse into one thing. So love
like
and
a
hate
singularity.
is a singularity.
Yeah.
And good and
then
evil is
there's-
a singularity. And,
So there is something to it, because my point, like...
it's expressing something,
Well, it's interesting what you're saying about that, because, like, I always remember growing up, like, it wasn't, and I've heard this from other people, and I think it's a philosophy that I sort of embody myself, even in, like, teaching. It's like, I don't get mad, I get disappointed. And that's far more effective in, like, promoting change with somebody, is if, and because I remember it growing
anger
up. Like,
invokes defense, whereas disappointment
Like, I remember
invokes,
my parents being angry and being like, okay, that's scary, like, that's not good. But, like, that doesn't make me as, like, that might make me react more in the moment, but it doesn't promote or
Change.
foster long-term change as much as, like, oh, somebody's, like, really disappointed. Like, I
You know
really
what I would
hurt
say
somebody.
the difference is? I would say anger is an emotional outburst, whereas disappointment is the regulated version of that. It's
Right.
like,
Yeah. So
you
that's my
see-
question with
yeah.
Trump. Like, would you be more like in thinking about sort of, you know, not hating him, but on a practical level, like would it be more productive than to, like, share your disappointment, right? Because
Well,
he feeds on hate.
what
Like,
I
that's
would-
his thing. I think hate is
He feeds on attention.
and a lot of that is hateful attention. But, like, I think he would be much more cognitively miserable if people didn't hate him as much as he's aware that they do.
Yeah, and I, of course, I can't pretend to even know what's going on inside the mind of
course.
Trump.
I mean, who knows for sure. Yeah.
The thing that comes to mind though is I was reading a few different like spiritual kind of people. One is Richard Rohr, and another is this speech Ram Dass gives. And the idea is a lot of people appreciate a person like Martin Luther King intellectually,
Yeah.
but then they don't connect with the spiritual part, which is his spirit. The spiritual message was, commit any act of violence to me and I will love you back, right? This is the message of Jesus at its purest form.
Right.
It's also
Right.
the message of Ram Dass, who's this Buddhist spiritual teacher. His vibe is, and he specifically talks to activists when he says this. He says, do whatever you must do. Stand up for the causes you believe in. Stop the people who need to be stopped, but never put them out of your heart. Meaning, things need to get done in the world, but you don't need to hate people to do it.
Right.
And if you're acting out of the motivations of resentment, hatred, fear, those are the same emotions that cause the very problems you're in and will likely lead to different versions of those problems. And the only solution might be like actual love.
It's so funny how that, again, that comes back to this idea of, like, the extremes have more in common with each other than the moderates.
They're kind of stuck in the same problem.
Well, they're playing the same
game, and guess what? In that game
of like what
everyone
result they
loses.
Want. Well, and their whole thing is like, I want to win, though.
But
right?
but they never define winning.
Well, look at Trump. Like, do you think Trump's a happy person?
No, I think
he's probably highly miserable.
I think
How
he's
could he not
miserable,
be?
and there are degrees of misery that he could feel that he psychologically blocks out.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure.
That's like
just in my
classic
observations,
repression,
yeah.
right?
Sure.
But of course, he could feel more miserable if he were to consider who he really is.
Yeah.
And the farther you get from who you really are, the farther you go into the states of mind where you hate people. Like if you think to yourself you genuinely hate people, like I haven't felt the emotion of hate in forever. Not forever, in 5 years.
I mean,
not forever, but like since I started
Relative,
meditating
yeah.
and like learning about some of these Buddhist philosophies, like I actually looked at what I thought was hate in my mind and then kind of deconstructed it. And like you said, like you realize anger and disappointment are you can see hate as just a different emotion, like more zoomed
or
out.
like a tuned up emotion of those other emotions.
Sure.
Right? Yeah.
Or maybe an out of balance version of it,
Yeah,
right?
sure, yeah.
So the Ram Dass thing is you might even have to put someone in jail, right? Someone commits a crime. They do the worst possible crime. I don't even have to say it. You can imagine someone who has committed the worst
fill in the blank.
possible.
Whatever
Fill
you
in the
want, yeah.
blank. Put them in jail. Why do you put them in jail? To prevent them from doing such an awful thing again.
Right.
But you are capable as a human being. You're capable to do all those things without putting that person out of your heart, without putting them out of your sphere of compassion, right? And I think most problems, whether it's between social justice warriors and people on the center and the right, whatever the bullshit is, most problems arise from that place in a human's mind where they make someone an other. They don't see what's in common with them, but they see only what's different. And they think they're seeing the whole picture. They think they're nailing down that person as being a this or a that.
Oh God!
And they
so
don't
many
realize that
examples of
they're only
throughout
seeing
history,
part
yeah.
of that person.
Yeah.
So don't put them out of your heart. You'll start to understand that, hey, they're just like me, except they were born this way, came from this, came from that, whatever. And then, at least you can now be in a balanced place to have a conversation and move forward. Any last words, Joe? It's late. By the way,
Bagels.
folks, we recorded this one pretty late.
You want to get some bagels?
Holy shit, I might not be not opposed.
Does 7-Eleven have bagels?
Oh God, let's figure this out. Well, guys, thanks for sticking through the one of our more serious episodes, I guess.
We didn't crack enough fart jokes for sure.
At least we got a little silly at
for
the end.
2018.
So I guess
you said some things that are going to be real highlight reels.
Oh, I'll listen back.
That means Luke's going to be like, oh God, I got to edit.
So I guess Joe and I ranted a little bit, but theoretically you're about to hear Johnny bragging about winning again.
Yeah, but Johnny's also hammered.
Yeah, but don't listen to him. Yeah.
Well, he only won, we decided, because you lost.
Yeah, he didn't win. I lost.
Which is, I mean,
Right?
again, it's fine. It happened. I've done it myself. I'll do it again. Like, it happens. But, like, not the most impressive win if you're a first-time listener. Johnny didn't, nail it.
He's genuinely beat us before, but this wasn't one
No,
of them.
you'll hear him in his recording. He's going to be like, I got those fuckers.
Yeah.
Like, trust me. Like, yeah, you can tell by his degree of sloppiness.
But as per the rules, he gets the last word.
Yeah,
So that's how it works.
Yeah, he did win fair and square. I give
right.
him that for sure. So thank you for joining us for this
All right,
episode.
so we got the politics off our plate. Next episode, what are we doing?
I would like to say, first of all, on our Podbean site, we finally surpassed 1,000 downloads.
Thank you for downloading.
Thank you very much, all our fans,
also
all our
like
subscribers.
1,000 views on YouTube too.
We are like 10 views away from 1,000 views on YouTube. So if you haven't been to our YouTube channel yet, it's a link with a lot of letters and numbers, and we will link it in the description. And if you are our 1,000th
There's no way to guarantee
YouTube
that, Joe.
view,
There's no way.
You haven't let me finish, Luke.
Okay.
If you are our 1,000th YouTube view, congratulations.
Oh,
and thank you so much for supporting us.
Do check out our YouTube channel if you don't know about it, because
it's awesome. There's the clips are way better than this shit.
Yeah. We do post like the full episodes there for people who only use YouTube, but we also like cut up these long episodes and like try to find like funny clips
nuggets,
and post them.
Yeah.
So Obviously, it's boring to listen to over 2 hours of us just talking.
I don't think anybody's.
I mean, you have to be pretty desperate, right? You're probably like in your car, or maybe you're like walking on the beach or something.
Yeah, you've done so much cocaine.
Hopefully, you're not like jerking off while listening to us. Like, we don't want that.
Do you think there's like one person?
I don't want that audience.
So we hit 1,000 downloads. Do you think there's like at least one guy who's just like, you know, he's into
probably
you
not,
talking through
but
a black
at least
onion
one
condom?
person. At least one person was thinking about it as they were listening to us.
you are talking through a black onion condom.
All right, let's wrap this up.
Yeah.
Any last words?
I don't know. I feel like, you know, we should. I can't hit the Skype button.
Oh, I was gonna say you look like you're gonna hang up on me on person.
I was gonna try to hang up on you, but I realized I can't.
All right, Joe, I'm calling it.
Wait, Ricky wants to say something.
Okay.
Ricky.
All right, thanks guys. Thanks for downloading. Peace.
We'll see you next episode.
Yeah, I just hung up. I just got him. They thought I had a point to make. I would say, if you disagree with someone, you should hit them. There's obvious implication. I disagree with that. You should talk it out, you know, come to a resolution, become friends, and then go do something worthwhile, like watch fucking Star Wars or the fucking Godfather Part 1 and then 2. Just do it. Take a weekend. It'll take that long. Have time to talk about the movies in between. Fucking amazing. And that I will not forgive. Such a good movie. Look at all those fucking dope lines. Read about how Brando's a fucking maniac during it. Or pick something else. It's the idea of nerding out about stuff. So, yeah, this was a pretty heavy episode. Not a lot of jokes. Hopefully we didn't offend you, and if we did, we're sorry, but we're not going to do this often. We'll go back to commenting on things that not only are we just as uninformed on as politics, but that we find less inflammatory for you, the person, because we don't mean to offend or upset you guys, because that's why we're out here. Anyways, thanks for coming out, and peace, bitches. Next episode's going to be dope. We're definitely going to have a beer episode coming up. This is the post script. Definitely going to have a beer episode coming up. Maybe a couple of standalone interviews I'm working on with some people in the industry so we can learn a little bit more about how craft beer happens and what's happening in craft beer to do the lame wordplay. All right, guys. Signing off. Have a great night. Bye.